The world has witnessed an event that changes the usual idea of reality. An online virtual reality game with full immersion was presented. This game was called Life Cry, and our hero had to immerse himself. At one point, someone asked him if the NPCs were just a program, to which our hero answered yes without hesitation. NPCs are not alive, but only part of the program code created by humans. His interlocutor had the exact opposite idea. He said if they are just part of the program code, then why do they behave like that? He asked why then they could smile so genuinely at him, and why they cried at his action. There was anger on his face, and pain and misunderstanding in his voice. He shouted for answers, asking for answers to his questions. He still didn't understand why the NPCs were showing emotion. In response to all of this, our hero remained silent and stared blankly at his interlocutor. At another point in time, the protagonist encountered a green troll. He was clearly not a kind creature. The troll wanted to attack, but the young man would not be intimidated by him. He drew his weapon and was ready for this fight. Our hero grinned, and just before the fight started, an interesting thought occurred to him. At that moment, the troll had already started to run furiously in his direction with a shout, and he was not interested in any word. The young man was not frightened at all. He only clutched his weapon tighter in his hands. As he grouped up and launched his attack, he came to one conclusion out loud. NPCs don't know that humans created them, and that's why they live, said our hero a second before the fight began. Finishing his thought, he began what he was perfectly able to send his enemies to the other side. The battle ended very quickly, but its sounds managed to scare away the birds, and our hero, having emerged victorious, continued to philosophize. Looking at the defeated troll, he thought about how it happened that no one knows what lies ahead. He was silent for a moment, as if waiting for a response to his words. In response to his monologue, all around him was silent, and he wondered if it was true that no one knew. Putting aside the melancholy of his thoughts, our hero realized that he was thinking about something strange. Sitting on a stump and coming to more pressing matters, he wondered what level he was at in this game. This question came up the moment he felt an unfamiliar pain in his arm. It was unusual for him, and he realized that this game was different from the previous one. He looked up and finally realized what was really going on. He was in a new virtual world. He had entered the created world of Lifecraft. After a while, our hero stood in the store and looked at the things lying in the bag, and then heard the surprise of the seller, who called him Slime. He had been doing that for a long time, and the young man was incredibly angry with this nickname. He had asked many times not to be called that. The salesman wondered why he had to stop calling him that, since Slime was the hero's name. In response, Lime was getting angrier and angrier, which was evident on his face. He repeated that he had asked Uncle Saint Dan many times not to call him that, but Saint Dan was still unaffected by the boy's anger. He laughed and patted Lime on the head, saying that he didn't grow from his temper. "What's my height got to do with it?" the young man replied, removing Saint Dan's hand from his head. Lime reminded him that he had already asked 24 times not to be called that. The uncle listened to the request with a completely unemotional face. He was amused and asked the young man if that was why Lime was so stuffy, that he was small in stature, and who counted the requests. The young man's patience came to an end. His brow furrowed and real anger appeared in his eyes. He grabbed his weapon, and at that moment shouted that this was exactly why he shouldn't be called that, swinging at Uncle. Saint Dan easily stopped Lime's weapon simply by catching it with his bare hand. The young man was shocked by this action because he didn't understand how it was even possible. There was not a single emotion on Uncle Saint Dan's face, as if he had not made any effort at all. The shock on our hero's face was immediately replaced by an awkward smile. At this awkward moment, Uncle Saint Dan laughed as he continued to restrain the hero's weapon. He exclaimed that although Slime was a bad boy, he was very strong, and in his mind he was only wondering what the difference in levels was. With an innocent look on his face, he told Uncle that he was sorry for what had happened, and that there was nothing he could do about it. Smiling Saint Dan called the guy Lemon Cheek and asked what he meant by that. He asked again not to call him that, or he would tell Aunt Saren about it. Saint Dan abruptly let go of his weapon and exclaimed in fright that it was against the rules. Smiling Lime asked sarcastically if it really was. The uncle turned away abruptly and began to quickly look for something, asking the young man to wait. He handed him a quiver full of arrows and said that he could give them away for free once in exchange for silence. Our hero was surprised, for he had seen such arrows in the armed forces. He knew that these crossbow bolts were a good thing. After accepting the gift, he once again asked his uncle not to call him Slime. Saint Dan agreed and offered him to become a merchant, as he would not go out of his way for a word. The young man said he needed to grow up. At this, our hero said goodbye to Uncle and headed for the exit of the store, On the street, Lime thought about the fact that in this game, everything looks too real, and NPCs do not differ from ordinary people. But he realized that with Arhat's technology, even androids could be created, so it was natural. Remembering that he received the promised 50 coins, our hero hurried, as he was afraid of being late. Lime finally reached the tall red tower, standing alone in the square. Hurriedly, he ran up the stairs and opened the door and entered the room. A young man greeted him and asked what our hero was looking for. Lime replied that he hadn't seen him in a long time, and called him Burial. With joy on his face, Burial was surprised and exclaimed our hero's name. Lime asked how Burial was doing, to which he replied that he was doing the same old thing. Having put the boxes on the table, Burial clarified whether he had come to sell his loot. Our hero said that he had brought the lifeless body of a goblin in medicine, and his friend remembered that he took a book on medicinal plants. Lime clarified that the book was worth 5 gold pieces, and therefore working. Burial asked if the goblin was in the cart, and received a positive answer. He asked Lime if it was convenient for him to carry the cart every time. Our hero said that it is inconvenient, but he has no inventory. Burial clarified why his friend would not buy a bag with expanded space in installments. After imagining such a bag, Lime thought it was a good idea, and sounded very convenient. Our hero asked the cost of the bag, to which Burial said that the bag holds about 15 square meters, and he made it himself. Continuing to answer, he clarified that the cost of the bag was 100 gold pieces. If you take it in installments, then 20 gold a month, and it will be interest-free. At the same time, Lime asked if there were no defects this time, as in the past, homemade items of Bariole, to which he said no, because he was helped by his teacher. Our hero immediately realized that this was Burial's homework for the practice exam. With offense, he replied to Lime that he could have said that he did not like the bag, and he was not the only one who wanted to buy it. Laughing, our hero calmed Burial and asked him to show him the bag. At the same moment, Burial quickly ran to get it out of the closet, and Lime thought that his friend seemed really confident in his creation. Turning to his friend, Burial said that he was incredibly lucky because it was the first bag he had ever made. With joy in his voice, Burial turned around with the bag in his hands, but on Lime's face there was an emotion of bewilderment. Holding back laughter, our hero asked his friend if it was the bag he was talking about. Not knowing what to answer, Burial continued to hold it in his hands and awkwardly silent. Looking at all the scuffs on his creation, Burial exclaimed that the bag was quite sturdy, and its elasticity and storage options were enhanced by magic. After these words, Lime finally asked Burial to give him the bag. After receiving it in his hands, our hero stared at it silently for a few moments. This made Burial nervous as he waited for a reaction to his product. Eventually, Lime said that it should rather be called a bag than a pouch. These words upset Burial greatly, as this was his first creation. His emotions quickly changed, and he told Lime that it should be called a bag. Hearing this, Lime raised the bag high above his head without giving it to its owner. Our hero said he would take it back on one condition, if he got it for free. This made Burial angry. He said it was foolishness, and to give him the bag quickly. To this, Lime replied that, well, since Burial was trying so hard, he would pay him half the value of the bag, 50 gold pieces. This shocked Burial, and he said that paying half was absurd. The cost of the magic reagent is equal to that amount. Lime started pushing his buddy, saying that who else would want to buy this bag since he hadn't even finished it, and buyers are too picky nowadays. No one else would want to buy a bag that wasn't even finished. So he offered to pay 50 gold pieces in installments. Burial hesitated and mumbled, not expecting such an answer from Lime. But our hero stood his ground and repeated his offer once again. Tears filled Burial's eyes. He was on the verge not to burst into tears. Seeing such a reaction of his buddy Lime was for a second taken aback. He cautiously asked Burial if he was crying because of his words. Trying to calm him down, Lime asked if he was too harsh in the conversation, and if so, how much money Burial himself wanted. At the end of his speech, our hero asked his friend if he had calmed down. Still sobbing, Burial clarified that he would give the bag for 80 gold pieces for a minimum of 75, and the moment he finished naming the price, he burst into tears again. With a smile on his face, Lime agreed to this price of 80, so 80. Wiping the tears from his face, Burial wailed that it was unfair to sell his first creation like that. Lime quietly patted his friend on the head, saying that he could do better next time. Burial clarified that it would be even more expensive then. Having calmed down, Burial asked to wait a bit before he brought the contract, and our hero agreed. Watching Burial's fussing in Lime's mind, the thought arose that this NPC was no different from a living person. Interrupting the hero's thought, the NPC handed him a contract and asked him to sign it. Out loud, Lime clarified only one question. Will he really pay 20 gold per month, and received a positive answer. At the same moment, calculations were going on in his mind. Selling the entire inventory would yield 200 gold, and accounting for expenses would leave 50. If the bag cost 20 gold and the down payment was 10 gold, then he would have exactly 20 gold left for all other expenses. Having finished his mental calculation, Lime gave Beriol the contract. Our hero held out a pouch of money to the NPC and asked him for it. To the German bank of the neighboring country of Helfen, in the name of Gollum III, and Beriol agreed to do so. But the NPC hesitated for a second and froze in place holding the pouch. Later, Beriol asked why our hero keeps transferring his money to different accounts. Lime said that it is only because of his job, and that he is not a good worker. Beriol clarified that he is just a monster hunter, but Lime said that he does everything to make money. Our hero became more serious, and added that although he said it, but in fact, he exchanges virtual money for real money and pays for his life with it. His middle name is Dark Gamer. After all, one day in real life equals a week in the game, and he has been in the game for 49 days. Since the game just came out, it has become very popular and expensive. When converted to real money, 1 gold is 100,000 won in real life. According to Lime, it's not exorbitant, but it's a high rate. And that was the end of his monologue about his activity. He decided to leave at this point as Beriol was still sorting items. When the NPC heard this, he got a little sad and asked if Lime was already leaving, to which he replied that he had already done everything he wanted to do. Beriol smiled and said that it was fine, and that they would see each other again. Leaving the tower, our hero said goodbye to the NPC and thought that he should go to the Temple of the Arhat. Before leaving, Lime stopped at the front door and turned around to look at Beriol. He was still sitting silently looking at him, as he had a while ago. Without hearing anything, Lime said he was leaving and finally walked out of the tower. As he walked out the door, our hero thought that Beriol had a face like he wanted to ask something, but he didn't. Lime clutched his head trying to banish his thoughts. As he walked down the street, he came to the conclusion that he shouldn't overthink things. As he approached the temple, our hero looked around and thought he was finally there. The temple stood in the rays of the setting sun, and on its walls hung the logo of the Arhat. Once inside, Lime thought that this was the only place in the game where he could feel like he was in a virtual world. The Temple of the Arhat seemed a little too sullen and forsaken as he continued to look around it. Then a voice inside the temple greeted Lime and said that this was the place where the absolute and all-powerful had descended to Earth. At the same moment, a priest in white robes and bright orange hair appeared in the Temple of the Arhat. Looking at him, our hero had only one thought in his mind. This priest seemed particularly tedious and boring, and his presence increased the feeling of the virtual world. The Arhat priest continued to stare at Lime in silence. Our hero came to the conclusion that everything that was happening was evidence of a real game. Lime informed the priest that he wanted to improve his characteristics. The priest smiled and replied that our hero was worthy of moving to the next level. Having said that, the priest raised his hand and started to do something. After these actions, a very bright flash of light lit up around him. Lime could barely look at it, squinting his eyes and trying to cover his face with his hands. The light disappeared, and our hero began to wipe his eyes, which began to hurt from such brightness. At that moment, the priest replied that Lime had moved to the 15th level, and he needed to continue working even harder. Lime thought that at the last checkup, he was only at level 12. Apparently, this promotion came after catching a bunch of goblins. Also, our hero asked the priest to check his characteristic, to which he said to come to the fountain. Going to it, Lime remembered that the highest level in the game is now 21st. Standing at the fountain and looking at his reflection, our hero called himself not handsome. The priest waved his hand over the water, and Lime's characteristics appeared in front of them. His strength was 11, stamina 10, power of 5 senses was equal to 14. Magic was equal to 15, and all attributes of the elements 5. Lime thought that originally all physical attributes were 9, and that was the threshold value. He glanced at the priest, but the priest was still smiling. After figuring out his attributes, Lime thanked the priest and asked if he could rest. The priest nodded and led our hero to another room of the temple. The abbot of the temple led Lime down the stairs, and with each step it became darker and darker. Finally, they descended into an underground room full of identical capsules. The priest wished Lime pleasant dreams. They exchanged pleasantries and he left. Our hero found a free place for himself among the many occupied ones. He stepped over the edge of the capsule and lay down in it, trying to make himself comfortable. Once he was settled in the capsule, he said out loud the command to log out of the system. After that, he closed his eyes and was ready for what would happen in a couple of moments. At that moment in reality, Lime's game capsule opened. Our hero assumed an upright position and coughed up a bit of water. Drops of water all flowed down his body, and our hero finally exhaled and realized that he was home. Lime reached for a towel to get the water off him, and while he was drying himself off, it occurred to him how much money he had on his balance at that moment. He turned on the computer and found out that he had 10 million won in his account, and he thought he didn't have long to save up. After all, that amount meant that Lime could last almost a year. Lime thought about his money for a while, but in the end, he decided that he needed to go out to eat. Lime continued his reasoning that it is interesting why such an elaborate artificial intelligence system is used for the game, and wouldn't it be advantageous to use it in another way? He thought that it would be more profitable to use it for military purposes or in computer programs, but not in games. But Lime immediately came to the conclusion that these questions had nothing to do with it. His world was a bunch of skyscrapers. A world of glass and metal. He walked along a perfectly familiar route to a small cafe. When he entered the cafe, he was immediately greeted by the owner, who said he hadn't seen Lime in a long time and he should stop eating only noodles at home. The uncle added that if Lime wanted to eat, he could come in any time and get free food from him. Our hero thanked the owner and said that he would definitely take advantage of this offer, but in the meantime, he would order a double portion of pork chops. While waiting for his meal, Lime listened to the news report that was on TV. The TV was saying that a man had been arrested in Seoul who had caused a riot by losing a game capsule, causing damage to property and people. The report went on to say that, according to his relatives, his condition was due to gambling addiction. Our hero was watching TV and heard the report talking about increasing the number of patrolmen on the streets. He did not understand why people always lose their temper. Immersed in his thoughts in his head, repeated the words, NPC game, capsule, life edge. But he realized that Life Edge was just a game. Our hero was abruptly pulled out of his thoughts by Uncle's words that Lime should also play less if he didn't want to be like the one in the report. Uncle once again questioned our hero, expecting to hear an answer. Lime replied that he could distinguish the real world from the virtual one, which calmed the uncle down. This dialogue again plunged Lime into his mental reflections. He thought that he didn't understand such people and their way of thinking at all. At the same moment, Uncle shouted that Lime's order was ready. After having lunch, our hero thanked Uncle for the food and left the cafe. But then something unusual and incomprehensible for Lime happened. Inside the building blew wind that disturbed our hero. But he came to the conclusion that it is normal for a building where there are 200,000 people. After finishing his thought, he came to the conclusion that it was time to go play because that's what Lime could do. Back in his usual virtual world, our hero quietly set the trap and was quite happy with what was happening. Soon he came to the idea that this game is inherently unfriendly. It is in open mode, but on its main page has nothing about the world inside the game. It was because of this that users were highly dissatisfied. Lime then decided to head to the next point, continuing his pondering. He thought about the fact that it was not even about the friendliness of the game, but about the game skills and other things in the characters. At that moment, he found another place to set his trap and reached into his pocket for a small rock, wondering if this was how it was done. After tossing the stone, Lime said the command to set the trap. Saying the command, our hero let go of the stone and it fell to the ground. As soon as the stone touched the ground, it turned into a small trap. Looking at the trap, Lime remembered that in the game, the user himself must learn about his skills. Continuing his reasoning, he came to the realization that there were over 1 billion people abandoned in this wilderness, and even though it was virtually wild, but just like in life, monsters and other forms of life appear here as a result of reproduction, and when they die, they become lifeless bodies. Lime thought about the fact that, unlike other games in this one, there are no damage and HP indicators like in other games. While pondering, our hero once again set the trap. Logically continuing the chain of thought, he thought about how to kill the monster in this case. If this world is almost no different from reality, thought Lime. Finishing his thought, our hero continued to look at the set trap. Lime thought that monsters go out of existence like in reality. They do it if you wound them in the heart with blood loss, and if you separate their legs or arms. Our hero had another stone in his hands, and he thought again that when he sees something like this, he knows he's in a game. He threw the stone on the ground and said the command to set the trap. Immediately the stone turned into a trap. Our hero continued his thought that some people got too close to the game and therefore almost lost their lives. And Lime himself had to look for information about setting traps on the internet to learn how to set them. After all, he hadn't been able to figure out how to do it on his own before, and it was difficult for him to learn how to set such traps. What to say about the complexity of creating skills? At that very second, Lime heard a sound that reminded him of a creature. Our hero realized that a wild boar was rapidly approaching him. Without a second's hesitation, Lime immediately grabbed his weapon. At once he could not understand where the sound was coming from, but after listening, he turned in the right direction. A wild boar was grunting furiously and running towards our hero. Coming face to face with the wild boar, Lime immediately pulled the bolt of his weapon. After that, our hero began to aim quickly and carefully. Lime pointed his crossbow at the approaching boar and fired. He did not immediately realize whether the bolt penetrated the boar's head or not, but our hero was lucky. It took Lime only one shot to defeat the boar, and now the breathless animal is already lying on its side in front of the man. Now Lime was no longer threatened, and he could finally breathe. After all, he shouldn't have any problems with any NPCs now. Lime was already level 15. But as he walked through the forest, he still couldn't figure it out. Whether it was a good level or not, since he couldn't ask anyone. As he approached the boar, Lime decided to put it away in the bag he bought from Burial for 80 gold pieces. After putting the boar away, our hero thought that it was a very handy bag. The young man began to reload the crossbow while thinking that he had spent 20 gold coins on the boar and that it was incredibly expensive. After all the actions, Lime decided to go and check the other traps. He approached one of the traps, and what he saw made our hero angry. The trap that he had recently set was lying broken on the ground. He immediately realized who was to blame and whose fault it was. On the ground, there were many traces of creatures he already knew. Lime realized that the broken trap was the work of the goblin. What was more frustrating for him was that it was not the first time it had happened. Exhaling, Lime took another stone and decided to set a new trap. He thought that spending 20 gold pieces was a lot of money, but the main problem was not the money. The main problem was that lately the goblins were taking his prey away but not attacking. Lime was very angry that the goblins were preventing him from leveling up, and eventually preventing him from replenishing his bank account. And lastly, he thought that if they ever interfered with him again, he would try to destroy all the goblins around him. The virtual world around our hero was surrounded by a magical barrier, but this barrier only reacted to the monster's magic, which gave off a strong stench. And the rather weak goblins had no magic and were forced out of the food chain. That's why they'd gotten this far. And then Lime wondered, suppose even simple villagers could handle weak monsters on their own, but wouldn't it be better to find and destroy their goblin lair? Even though it would be a hassle, it would definitely bring a lot of profit. And if you do everything carefully, there will be no more worries with the goblin. Goblins were constantly appearing in the place where Lime was, and he decided to set a trap there. After a moment in the forest was heard a terrible scream that made our hero nervous. This loud scream definitely belonged to a man in need of help. Our hero saw a bunch of belligerent goblins. They did not pay any attention to Lime and just walked forward to the place where stood a blonde-haired man who had recently screamed loudly. That man was bleeding and breathing heavily. It must have been a tough fight for him. When Lime saw this, he immediately ran to his aid, asking him to live a little longer. Our hero shouted that his companion cannot just go to the other world here. But more and more goblins were approaching the blonde-haired young man. Lime cocked his weapon and realized that he had to concentrate to get a shot. A shot rang out, and the crossbow bolt flew straight at the goblin. It was at this point that the other goblins noticed our hero and went on the attack. The attack of the goblins did not frighten Lime at all because he was ready for it. Seeing the goblin running at him, he just smirked and prepared to attack. The goblin was not confused by Lime's confidence and steadfastness and continued to run at him. With one powerful attack, our hero was able to stop the goblin with ease. With another attack, he kicked the opponent, causing him to fly away from the battle site. The other goblins also noticed the fight and ran to Lime to join in. And that's all Lime wanted. He was ready for it and even wanted to try to participate in such a fight. And that man, because of whom our hero took the blow on himself at that moment, was sitting quietly and trying to catch his breath. Being in this battle, Lime continued to fight using his usual weapon, but he again decided to give himself a bit of a head start and commanded a powerful attack. His blows on the goblins took on a blue glow and increased in power. The powerful attack hit the goblin and quickly sent it to the other side. A little tired by this point, Lime recognized that these monsters were quite fast. While our hero was trying to catch his breath, a wave of new goblins came running at him again. Despite the speed of these monsters, Lime thought that every fiber of his being was imbued with the will to live, and this thought gave him more power and strength. From his blows, the goblins kept falling. Already tired, Lime decided to make a powerful attack. He uttered a command that summoned the ghostly hand that was to be his. The ghost-shaped hand hit the goblin running towards Lime hard. This attack gave Lime some time to regroup and realize what he should do next. The tired Lime realized that there was not much left, and he needed to gather his strength. As the goblin retreated from the ghostly hand, Lime dealt him a decisive blow with his weapon and sent him to the other world. But it was not the last goblin. From behind, another monster was running at our hero. Lime used magic again, and the ghostly hand killed the goblin from the first time. Looking around, our hero saw another goblin approaching it. This monster was already too close to Lime, and it was necessary to act quickly. In the head of our hero came nothing better than to hit the goblin hard with his foot. After this blow swinging his weapon, Lime hit the monster again. Looking around, the young man noticed another goblin standing nearby. He swung hard, and his weapon flew straight at the goblin, who didn't seem to realize. This action killed the last goblin in the vicinity. Lime was finally able to exhale and end this long fight. Standing in the clearing, he realized it was time to examine the wounded man. As he approached him, our hero saw a bunch of cuts all over his body. He even tried to ask the wounded man if he was all right, but got no answer. In appearance, the wounded man resembled a monster hunter, but Lime did not understand how he got here. After searching him, our hero found 5 empty potion jars. Lime didn't understand what was going on, because all of these jars were worth 500 gold coins, which is 50 million won in the real world. It was also unclear why the wounded character looked so bad since he had drunk 5 potions, but he should have felt better. The wounded man kept silent and breathing heavily, ignoring all of our hero's questions. Looking at this, Lime thought that he wouldn't be surprised if this character would soon go to the other side of the world. And although he still couldn't figure out if it was an NPC or not, he was unpleasant to watch the character go to another world. Sadly, Lime thought about bringing the cart, but then a thought occurred to him. Even though he realized he wasn't very good at magic, and even if the effect of his actions will be insignificant, but he has no other option. Standing in front of the giant tree, Lime humbly placed his hand on it. He knew he could use mana up to twice a day. Invoking the almighty mana, Lime called upon its strong will to take away the life force. While saying this spell, he also specified that the mana was to absorb the power. After finishing saying the spell, Lime felt that he didn't feel good. After this spell, he became a little weak and felt that he started to feel dizzy. Although our hero had a mage class, but due to the lack of mana, his head kept spinning when he used it. Holding the mana in his hand, Lime thought that despite the discomfort in general, everything went well. As he approached the wounded man, Lime realized he was going to use his mana to infuse him with life force. Lime realized that it did not help the injured man, and his body still had severe wounds. Our hero decided to repeat his actions from the beginning, because he felt that once was not enough. After repeating the whole procedure with the infusion of life force, our hero's head began to spin much more violently, but he was reassured that he was not doing it for nothing, but to help. Then Lime noticed that the wounded man continued to bleed from the wounds, and he could not stop it. On the other hand, he realized that since this character was using potions, he could get a big reward for saving it. After throwing the wounded man on his back, Lime walked towards the town and started to think about what was going on. First, he put all his things in his bag, which was extremely convenient. Secondly, Lime's stamina had increased a bit, even though he had put everything into magic. Probably thought our hero this happened, because stats increases not only the temple, but also certain actions that he did a lot. Suddenly, the character on Lime's back abruptly asked him to stop. Our hero asked if he had regained consciousness, to which the wounded man asked to lower him. Once under the tree, the injured man exhaled and touched his wound. He asked Lime if he had tried to heal his wounds. After answering in the affirmative, our hero asked if his companion was all right. The wounded man remained silent and looked up at the young man and said it was too late, and an incomprehensible light lit up next to his wounds, frightening Lime. The wounded man was not frightened. He accepted that his deep wounds could not be cured, and even though Lime tried to do so, but the injured man realized that even so, he had little time left, and it was time to write a will. Everything that was happening caused Lime only emotions of shock and incomprehension. The injured man had a request. He asked Lime to give his body to his daughter after his departure into the other world. He also took out a glowing sign from his pocket and said that if he gave it to the Mercenary Association, Lime would receive a reward. After these words, the character's speech became quite slurred. He began to cough loudly and as if he had only a little time left. Toward the very end, he began to repeat that he wanted to see the smiling face of his daughter, Lena. He repeated only her name for a long time. And finally, there was silence in the forest. Our hero wished the wounded man to keep dreaming about it. After a while, Lime was again at Burial's tower, and he was surprised by our hero's plan for the near future. Burial wondered why he needed to go to the village to the goblins, if recently he had already brought the bodies of monsters. Hearing this, our hero asked his interlocutor whether he thought that Lime was weak and that he could not get there. Burial immediately tried to apologize for his words, but our hero asked him not to do it again. After these words, Lime handed his interlocutor a bag of money, calling it payment. Burial was very surprised, because he had paid the previous time only yesterday, and Lime said that he just wanted to pay faster. Counting 40 gold coins, Burial smiled happily, and said that it was exactly half of what he owed. With a completely serious face, Lime said that he had something else. Not hiding interest, Burial immediately decided to clarify what he had for him. Our hero calmly handed the candy to his interlocutor, surprising him a lot. Lime once again wanted to apologize for buying the bag in such a way. Finally, he asked Burial to eat the candy and left the tower. Walking through the square, Lime thought about his debt. He realized that he had 40 more coins to pay. He also remembered that mages buy the lifeless bodies of monsters at a high price. They do this to experiment with the magic extracted from the monsters, and because of this, mercenaries like Lime can make money. After thinking about it, our hero came to the conclusion that the mages have a lot of money because it is very expensive to buy and process such things. He remembered that there are monsters much more expensive than boars and goblins. Continuing to ponder on all sorts of things, Lime finally reached the Mercenary Association. At this place, he was once again unpleasantly greeted as Slime. This was said by the man standing in the only window behind the bars in this room. He asked Lime why he had come. Our hero replied that he had some business to attend to, and at the same time he wondered who was talking to him. The man in the window asked if Lime was on business, and smiled when he got a positive answer. This man called our hero a little boy incapable of crossing the magical barrier. These words hurt Lime's sense of self-importance, and he began to justify himself. At one point, the interlocutor interrupted the mental stream of our hero and asked why he had come. After a bit of silence, Lime began to dig in his pockets in search of that thing that was given to him by the wounded character. Having taken it out, our hero asked his interlocutor to look at it. The man standing behind the bars immediately thought about it and began to look at it intently. The man's speech began to slur. He asked Lime to wait, and suddenly he shouted loudly. At the moment of screaming, he quickly and firmly grabbed our hero by the neck. The man behind the bars said that this is the badge of the mercenary, Scar, and he does not understand where Lime could have taken it. Our hero couldn't answer the interlocutor's questions properly, as he began to choke on the man's action. The NPC looked at Lime with a horrifying look, full of hatred and contempt, and continued to clutch his neck tightly in his hand. But at one point, his grip loosened just enough to allow Lime to answer the questions he asked. And at that moment, the interlocutor again ordered our hero to answer the question. Lime began to tell that he met a guy who gave him this, told him to come to the association for a reward. The man behind bars asked if that mercenary was alone at that moment. Our hero answered in the affirmative and continued to tell the story. He said that he had found this character near the village while hunting, and even tried to heal his wounds. But Lime did not succeed, and the mercenary left a will and went to the other world. The interlocutor once again asked Lime if he had killed the mercenary. Realizing that our hero did not do it, the man behind the bars took his hands off his neck. Lime tried to catch his breath because he didn't know what would happen next, and at the same moment, the man behind bars asked how the mercenary really died. After a while, the dialogue came back to normal, and the interlocutor of our hero asked what he wanted from him. Lime said that he didn't need help in moving the body, as he had listened to the last request and brought it with him. The interlocutor was very surprised to hear that the body of the mercenary was lying outside the walls of the association. Lime also quipped that it was hard to carry it in a cart all the way to the village. The interlocutor was aroused by these words and began to inquire about the state of the mercenary's body. Lime replied that he had frozen it so that the body would not become ugly. The interlocutor asked him again if he had done so and received an affirmative answer. Lime told about the conclusion that if the body is frozen, it will stop decomposing, but the man behind bars was interested in how he was able to do it. Our hero said that he did it with magic, of course. The interlocutor laughed a little at Lime's words and decided to tell him a story. He began by saying that the mercenary Scar's daughter's name was Lena, and she would need to bring the money. The look of the man behind the bars became creepy, and he added that he would only trust Lime once. Seeing that look again, our hero without delay replied that he would do everything. Lime soon heard that Scar's daughter does not live here, and it will take some time to get to her. The man behind bars began to tell the story that Scar had gone on a business trip to earn money. Lime learned that Scar needed the money because his daughter was terminally ill, and there was no cure for her illness. Usually donating money to the temple would make the disease go away, but it did not always work, and not with everyone. The interlocutor quoted one of the gods saying that nothing in the world should be perfect, and people should not be able to cure all diseases. Listening to this story, Lime realized that he was being told one of the myths of this world with which he was already familiar. But the interlocutor went on to tell about one god of disease, Hadalvord, who presides over all the imperfections and anomalies of this world. And it was said that the god that causes disease is also a god of healing. Being good, he used to save people from all diseases. But when people began to forget him, he inflicted incurable diseases on them in anger. At that moment, Lime remembered that one of those diseases was influenza. Having listened to the story to the end, our hero decided to clarify where Lena, Scar's daughter, lives. The interlocutor gave him the address. It was the village of Pentel. Lime remembered that he had been to this village once before on business. The interlocutor explained to our hero that in Pentel there is a house of arms and courage. That's where Lena lives. Digesting this information, Lime agreed with everything said. Stopping his train of thought, the man behind the bars held out a wallet with 1,000 gold coins. Our hero could not understand where such a sum came from. His interlocutor explained that 887 coins are Scar's savings, and the rest of the money is an allowance in case of death. Slowly, Lime continued to stare at the wallet. Not knowing what to say, our hero asked his interlocutor what this allowance was. He answered Lime that the death of a mercenary means the failure of the mission, and in this case there is no reward, but the allowance is still paid. Holding this envelope in his hands, Lime thought about the fact that 1,000 gold coins is a lot of money. In the real world, that's 100 million won. Our hero said goodbye and walked out of the Mercenary Association to the street as he continued to think about cashing out. He thought that he could cash that money right now. Lime could just delete the character and start over. After all, that's a whole 100 million won. But Lime decided not to do that. Standing again in the store at Bariol's store, he asked our hero what he wanted to use the item he bought for. Lime sarcastically replied that Bariol always wants to know everything. Our hero wanted to buy a large capsule, and the salesman clarified that it would cost a lot, and he agreed, saying that he would take out a loan. Lime also added that he would pay back the money, and if necessary, he would pay with his own body. Hearing this, Bariol froze and even began to glow a little. At the same moment, our hero did not understand what was happening. Bariol, with a twinkle in his eye, asked if Lime would wear a prince's outfit in that case. Our hero heard this, and looked at Bariol even more questioningly. The salesman realized that Lime had misunderstood him, a little sad. So, he asked our hero to pretend he didn't hear what Bariol had just said. Only then did he finally bring the contract. After signing the contract, they said goodbye, and Lime went on his long journey. At some point, our hero brought the cart to the place where he left the frozen Scar. Seeing his body, Lime began to worry that he had frozen him too much. But there was no time for excessive worrying, and banishing these thoughts from his mind, he began to do his work. After putting Scar into the cart, Lime thought about getting a horse for the job, but then he remembered that a horse would cost him 300 coins. So, he decided to hitch up the wagon and pull the load himself. While pushing the wagon, Lime could only think of what other world a dark magician could pull a wagon. After a while, our hero began to feel fatigue and exhaustion from such a shock load. Almost all his strength left him at that moment, and it seemed to him that he would go to the other world. The only thing that kept him in tone was the already past 80 kilometers and the hope for an increase in stats of strength and endurance. He even thought that if he'd known he'd have to walk that far, he would have used a body control spell because he had not met anyone along the way. Our hero continued to mentally resent the fact that he, as a mage and necromancer, had to work with his hands. His thought was interrupted by a sharp shout of stopping. Lime looked around and saw a guard standing next to a large gate, and at that moment our hero realized that he had finally reached Pentel. Lowering the wagon, our hero said that he came from Peaton for work. The guard asked Lime if he was not a mercenary, if he had come for work. Our hero answered the guard in the affirmative. Their conversation went on unkindly and tedious. The guard was taller, and started laughing at the fact that even though Lime is small, he is already a mercenary. Our hero didn't respond to this teasing, and only asked the guard where he could find the House of Arms and Courage. The guard thought for a while, and told him that this building was very easy to find. It was right in front of the central square, and our hero went to it. Walking through the central square, Lime noticed the lack of people on the streets, and explained it by the fact that it was the harvest season. He stopped to take a breath and look around. His eyes fell on a building with lights in the windows and a sign on the roof. Lime entered the building and saw a lot of people, and heard the usual tavern requests. The guests of the House of Arms and Courage were loudly asking for alcoholic beverages. There were a lot of people in the building. Lime couldn't find a place to sit down. At that moment, he was greeted by a pleasant female voice. Our hero turned his head at the sound, and there stood a nice girl with glass mugs full of foamy drink in her hands. She said hello to Lime in passing and smiled at him. She worked here and had to hurry. Our hero saw the girl and said that he had come to the House of Arms and Courage on business. These words were heard by a muscular man who was standing nearby. He approached our hero and asked if he needed anything. This man was a couple of heads taller than Lime, and so he hesitated for a couple of seconds and did not know what to say. When he came to his senses, he answered that he was in the house on an errand, specifying that he needed to find the girl Lena. His huge interlocutor asked Lime if he was looking for Lena. Our hero once again clarified that he was there for just that. He was there to find Lena and to give her something. The interlocutor shouted the girl's name loudly and she looked back. When she heard her name, she went to the guys to ask what they wanted from her. The tall man told her that she was the one Lime was looking for. Our hero began his story at that moment by asking if Lena was the daughter of Scar, the monster hunter. The girl was a little confused and asked how Lime knew her father. To this he replied that he had come here precisely on her father's errand. It was at that moment that Lime had to tell the unpleasant truth about why he had come to Lena. But with a smile on her face, the girl interrupted him by asking how her dad was feeling. Lime asked her to move to a quieter place where he could relay her father's words. Lena said that not far behind the inn, there was a training ground and they could go there. Lime asked the girl to wait for him there, promising to come back soon. After a while, the capsule in which her father was lying was in front of the girl. The object caught her by surprise. Despite the girl's shock, Lime asked her to listen to him calmly. He relayed to her that her father had failed his last assignment as a mercenary. He also added that he had gone to the other world, but before that, he had left a will. The girl was so shocked that she could only call Lime's words lies. Lime silently looked at Lena, not understanding what else he could say to her. Our hero only quietly added that her father had bequeathed her all his property, which was in the same capsule where he was. The training ground was filled with the screams of Lena, who still couldn't believe what was happening. She shouted that Lime was lying, and that it was all a bad joke, and not true. Our hero was silent and quietly waited for the girl's hysteria to pass. But it did not pass, and Lena continued to insist that Lime's words are a stupid joke. With a single movement of his hand, our hero tore the tape with which the capsule was wrapped. As if by blows to the heart, Lime once again repeated to the girl the words about the death of her father. The lid fell off the capsule, and our hero repeated that he had brought her father's body in consequence of his last will. Immediately, tears flowed from Lena's eyes. She couldn't believe her eyes or her ears. Her father had really gone to the other world. Falling on her knees in front of the capsule, the girl hugged the lifeless body of her father, continuing to cry and agonize from the pain. After some time, our hero left the girl and came again to the House of Arms and Courage, where he was able to get compensation for his time and effort. The man who introduced him to Lena handed him a small bag of coin. Lime thanked the man and roughly realized that there were 50 gold coins. Suddenly, the man asked our hero if he knew what kind of disease Lena had. Without waiting for an answer, the man himself said that the girl's illness was called loss of life. This disease was characterized by the fact that over time, the life force of a person leaves his body. Lighting a cigarette, the man said that Lena's disease was incurable. In response, Lime asked what the symptoms of the disease were. Inhaling the smoke, our hero's interlocutor began to tell about that with this disease, the body cannot hold the vital energy and begins to slowly deplete, and Lena's body can't hold it. If the body is not filled with vital energy in time, the body of a person with this disease can one day dry up. This is where life stops, Lime clarified. The man also added that in order to keep Lena alive, she needs to constantly regenerate her energy in the temple. And the temple does not do this for free, and Lena needs a large sum of money to stop the course of the disease, which is what Scar tried to earn by becoming a mercenary. During the conversation, Lime learned that the dead man could receive up to 300 gold coins a month, that equaled the cost of a whole horse. According to our hero's calculations, Scar earned 500 gold coins a month, minus the cost of the temple and equipment. Silently, Lime was calculating Scar's average turnover, and then an idea came to him. He wondered if there were other ways of healing besides the temple, and asked his companion about it. The latter answered him that, of course there are, and magic can be used. But unfortunately, Scar could only turn to the temple, as the magicians demanded much more money. After moving to another place, our character was given a key to a room on the 3rd floor. Lime thanked the man who gave him the key and thought about the real world. He thought it was a good thing that there were devices with the option to recover in real life. Lime's device was called the Peacemaker. With a program, this device relieved fatigue and restored strength. The Peacemaker was 7 times more effective than real sleep. Having examined his room in the virtual world, our hero was satisfied with what he saw. The room was quite clean. Lime hung his things on the rack next to the bed and decided to lie down. He pondered whether or not he deserved what he got today, and came to a negative conclusion. Lime decided not to torture himself by thinking about it, and decided that he was playing this game not just for the money, but to have fun. Saying these words, he fell into a dream, and at the same time, moved to the temple of the Arhat. The priest appeared in front of Lime again. Our hero this time, again, wanted to improve his characteristic. With a wave of his hand, the priest began the usual calculation of the character's characteristics. However, instead of naming the characteristics, the priest specified that Lime had accumulated Irid, and he could go through several levels. This was the first time our hero had heard of this characteristic, and so he asked what an Irid was. The priest clarified that Irid is karma that is accumulated as a result of the player's actions, and thanks to it, it is possible to move to a new level. Hearing this, Lime thought that his interlocutor was as silent as a fish about other things. He realized that Irid is similar to experience points. Our hero asked if he could go to another level, and the priest said that yes, he could go to the 18th. This surprised Lime greatly because it meant going through 3 levels at once, and he had not fought much this time. Immersed in his thoughts, our hero seemed strange received information about experience points as karma. He continued his thought and decided to ask a question to the priest. In the direction of the priest sounded a question from Lime, who was wondering only to increase the level could be used Irid. The priest looked at our hero with a calm gaze and did not immediately answer the question. A slight tension arose in the air, as Lime did not like such a long pause. At the same moment, the priest clarified that he could not answer this question, and this information the player must get on his own. Our hero was angered by such an answer to his simple question. Seeing this, the interlocutor asked to ask him a little differently. Lime immediately realized that this was a hint, and it meant that Irid could be used for other purposes. He immediately realized that he could find out something else, and asked the priest for his credentials. As the priest led him to the fountain, Lime thought it would be hard for him to find out the truth. At the same moment, Lime's stats appeared in the fountain, from which he learned that his strength and stamina had increased by 1. But he also noticed that among these characteristics there was no Irid's value. For a second it put our hero in a stupor, and he did not understand what he should do next. After a moment, however, Lime realized what had happened. He remembered that he had listened to Scar's request and fulfilled his last will. By all indications that Lime had identified, it was these actions that had allowed him to accumulate Irid. And even though these tasks were tedious for our hero, they were not difficult, and it was strange to earn so much Irid for them. And at that moment, Lime finally realized what had been happening to him lately. In his memories, our hero went back to the moment before he met Scar. He asked the priest to improve his techniques. The priest asked if he wanted to create a trap setting technique, and Lime responded by asking if the temple had such a technique. The temple also replied that he didn't have to answer, and this memory prompted Lime to check his magic techniques. The priest standing at the fountain opened a list of the character's magic techniques, each of which was in training. After reviewing his magic skills, Lime asked if the level of magic skills could be increased. The priest replied that they could be upgraded twice with the help of Irid. Lime realized that Irid is actually general experience points and can be used to increase the level of magical skills. Our hero decided to go all the way and asked the priest if it was possible to check his skills. The priest replied that it was impossible, making Lime angry again. And now, our hero asked if he could check his techniques. The temple responded positively to this question, and Lime realized that this program did not understand slang at all. After the priest opened the plate with the techniques of our hero on the screen, appeared only one item with the study of setting traps. This seemed interesting to Lime, and he began to ponder the fact that, presumably in the game, Irid accumulates as a result of certain cause and effect relationships and common action. But at the same moment, Irid pumped some of his abilities up to the next level. Lime also thought that during the game, he had definitely confirmed 3 skills, namely powerful attack, sensitive hearing, and aim. In the end, our hero also came to the conclusion that this game likes to complicate and confuse everything. Leaving the temple, Lime decided to look at Uncle Saint Dan, who kept calling him Slime. But on the other hand, this NPC was grateful to our hero for providing meat and goblins. And even though Lime kept reminding the NPC not to call him Slime, Sandan wanted to repeat it over and over again. And that's what made our hero more and more mad. Leaving the store, Lime went into the forest to check the traps and found them empty again. Deciding to check the remaining options, he took out a map on which he marked the places where the traps were placed. Seeing the dots on the map, our hero realized that at that moment he had checked almost all the traps. This moment made Lime very upset. He put the map away and began to think. He thought at that moment only about where to go now. For some time, our hero walked through the forest looking for traps. And then he realized that he had already looked around almost everything. He had been walking around for about 2 or 3 hours, and it was already nighttime, and he still hadn't managed to find or catch a single goblin. In an instant, realizing this, our hero had a brilliant idea. Faced with the lack of goblins, he decided to catch a rabbit. Sometime later, cooking rabbit in a cauldron, Lime thought about the fact that if you starve in the game, you will feel hungry. But when the character is in the virtual world, through the World Walker nutrients come into the real body, and it was surprising for our hero. The next thought, Lime sarcastically admitted that, despite the fact that he had purchased an expensive bag, he had to spend the night in the open air. Finishing a hot meal, our hero abruptly froze when he heard a strange sound. A sound that reminded him of what he had been looking for all day. It was goblins. The sound coming from the monsters was quiet, and Lime realized that they were far away. But he decided to follow them, since he couldn't find anyone today. After putting out the fire and putting away the dishes, the young man wondered why the goblins were noisy at night. Could they have a nocturnal life? Lime decided to check it all out, and quickly began to approach the source of the sound. Stopping at a tree, our hero quietly peeked behind it and saw that a lot of goblins holding torches in their hands, talking and carrying the prey group, went deep into the forest. The most surprising thing for Lime was the fact that the goblins were talking to each other. This could mean that this bipedal race of monsters had intelligence and a language of their own. Having made this conclusion, Lime continued to follow them. As he approached the magical barrier, Lime saw a settlement of monsters and realized that this was their lair. Our hero realized that he needed to come up with a plan where the next step was to find out information about the Arson Ridge, which is located behind the barrier. He also needed to determine the balance of power and whether there was someone like a mage in the lair who could complicate the task. He decided to settle down not too far away. Back in the city, Lime immediately went to Bariol, who immediately sensed a trick asking if he had brought the goblin again. Our hero replied that he had information about the monster's lair. This information excited Bariole, and he was ready to continue the dialogue. He remembered that his teacher had talked about this lair with the Mercenary Association, and heard that they had not managed to solve anything. When Bariol discussed the problem, he came to the conclusion that the situation was dangerous for both the people gathering medicinal herbs and the locals, and Lime added that it would become more difficult to reduce the monster population over time, and it was necessary to address the issue now. Our hero calculated that 70 game days had passed, and about 7 days ago, he found a lair and began to exterminate it. He's been slaughtering up to 12 goblins every day, and so the monsters became alarmed. This information frightened Bariol. He decided to tell everything to his teacher. A little later, Lime asked his interlocutor to transfer this month's money to a man with a funny nickname in English. Lime was confused by the nickname Pencil Nagalove. He thought it was too pretentious, as if the man wanted a cool nickname but failed. Then our hero was attracted by the reaction of NPCs to this nickname. Bariol repeated the nickname and asked why it was so strange, and Lime immediately realized that the NPC could not translate this name. It was funny to him that even though the theme of the game was medieval Western fantasy, the local NPCs didn't understand English. Lime wondered how the game was played by people who spoke a different language, whether or not they also use Russian to enhance their skills. His train of thought was interrupted by Bariol with a question about the candy that our hero gave him earlier. He was interested in the process of its preparation. Embarrassed, Lime told him that he only made it to increase his cooking skill. After telling the recipe for the candy, Lime decided to make sure that Bariol remembered everything and could repeat it himself, and only then. He decided to check if he had prepared the encyclopedia of monsters that our hero had asked for. Bariol asked to wait and went into the back room in search of a roll with the book. Finding it, he was incredibly pleased with himself, calling himself a boss who can find anything. After Bariol, Lime decided to go straight to Uncle St. Dan's store and asked about the goblins that might suddenly come to the village. Lime was taken by surprise by this question, and Uncle added that such rumors are rumored in the area, and the locals are afraid to go outside the settlement. Our hero realized that he was not the only one who had seen these monsters. The uncle teasing Lime asked him if he was going to run away if the goblins showed up, and he replied that he wanted to get a confession. This surprised St. Dan. He did not see Lime as a mercenary, but as a child. He looked at the boy kindly and added that he had stopped calling him Slime, but he was too young to be a hunter. But he was too young to be a monster hunter. The uncle tapped Lime on the head for a while. Lime took the man's hand off his head and heard him ask if he had ever seen a goblin warrior. Uncle Saint Dan repeated his words, saying that Lime had apparently only seen the low-ranking goblin workers, who were responsible for food hunting and scouting. He added that goblins' intelligence matched their rank, and ranks came in many forms. A goblin could be a blacksmith butcher, and even a priest. And after Saint Dan clarified if what he said was not natural. After all, the laborers did not even know how to handle weapons and fight. Our hero silently continued to listen to Uncle, absorbing useful information. Meanwhile, he moved on to the goblin warriors who were fighting on the front lines and looked like D-class mercenaries. Hearing this, Lime wanted to know what class they were. Making an awkward face, Uncle Sendan said that our hero's level was about F. This again offended Lime, who was only getting insults from Sandan. But for Uncle, all his words always seemed to be the pinnacle of humor, so he continued to laugh. Lime decided to ask if goblins were stronger than warriors. Becoming more serious, Uncle replied that such monsters were goblin knights he had once encountered. These monsters ruled the warriors while being very bloodthirsty. They could be compared to B or C-class mercenaries. They were as tall as a human, but much stronger. But that didn't hinder their agility, as they were impossible to catch up with in the forest. All this information upset and frightened Lime a little. Having told all this, Uncle just continued to stare at our hero in silence. He added that since the goblins are already nearby, they are quite strong and should be feared. There are many of them, and even an experienced mercenary may not survive the fight. Our hero promised that he would always try to be on guard. Uncle agreed, because a goblin warrior could swat Lime with one punch, and since they walk in groups, they immediately become a formidable opponent. These words made our hero for a while silent and thinking, and after a couple of seconds, he asked Saint Dan why he was so worried about him. This question took Uncle by surprise. He obviously did not expect to hear these words from the young man. Our hero also added that such worries on the part of Sandan were very nice. This embarrassed Uncle Sandan even more. Finally, Uncle added that if Lime got to the other side of the world, he wouldn't be able to go to bed properly, adding that he should be more careful. With a smirk on his face, he asked his friend not to worry about him, because he wasn't a little kid anymore. After receiving his crossbow bolts, Lime paid Saint Dan and left the store. Once outside, he began to go over what Uncle had said. He summarized that the goblins had their own hierarchy and strong warriors. This could mean that destroying their settlement would be difficult, and he would have to double-check everything. Once in the forest, Lime checked his traps as usual, and surprisingly found a small chipmunk in one of them. After examining the animal, our hero realized that he had to let it go, as there was no food in it. When the trap was opened, the chipmunk quickly ran away, leaving our hero to set the traps further. Lime went back into his thoughts. He realized that he had more mana since setting the traps was no longer dizzying. He thought that even though others were investing in strength and stamina, he was more interested in having fun in the game, building up his skills by hunting and fighting. Suddenly, our hero listened to the terrain and noticed in the distance talking goblin. This fact pleased Lime, because it meant that his ability of sensitive hearing was working perfect. To observe the goblins, our hero had to climb a tree. After getting comfortable, he remembered that these monsters are sensitive to the smell of blood. Lime reached into his hiking bag and pulled out a rabbit carcass, threw it under the tree, and waited for the goblins to approach. After a fairly short period of time, the monsters appeared, and our hero noted that they didn't wait long. While the first goblin approached the rabbit, Lime began to speak a spell. In the middle of this spell, our hero took out his crossbow, and quickly taking aim, he finished the spell of the weak ghost's hand. At the same moment, the spell struck the first goblin, scaring his kin, and our hero at that moment jumped down from the tree in full force, ready for the attack. The weak ghost's hand spell continued to strike the monsters, and Lime was in flight, choosing his victim to strike first. After striking one goblin, our hero noticed another monster behind him. Continuing to strike several monsters, the young man began to use a powerful attack. After this attack, Lime thought that it was time to implement the second part of the plan. He uttered another one, which was called the Dead Man's Offense, and it was to carry out Lime's orders. The surviving goblins prevented our hero from finishing the spell, and Lime decided to kill them at that moment. The spell he cast destroyed one goblin. The next penultimate goblin fell from Lime's powerful attack, and finally all the goblins went to the other world, and the last monster was left. Our hero was greatly surprised by the action of the last goblin. That monster was far away from the battle, and as if it did not want to participate in it. Lime at one point even seemed as if the goblin was afraid. He hid under a tree and pressed his ears to his head in terror, but this sad look did not bother Lime. By casting a powerful attack spell, our hero sent the last monster to the other world with one blow. Summarizing this battle, Lime admitted that to send to the other world at once 5 goblins was heavy. Lime began to realize the second part of the plan by reviving the goblin with a body control spell. Slowly, the monster began to rise in front of our hero. If not for the huge wound on the monster's chest, it would be hard to distinguish it from a living one. From his bag, Lime took out a bandage that he was going to wrap the goblin's wound, because without blood, he would not be able to look normal. Our hero began to wrap the bandage around the goblin's chest, hoping it would stop the blood. Even though this bandage looked bad on the monster, it did a good job of stopping the blood. Having prepared the goblin for his plan, Lime asked him to raise his arm, which the goblin did at the same moment following his master's orders. Lime laughed at this action because the situation reminded him of training a dog. Looking at the monster, Lime realized that it could move without any problems, and it could even be used in a fight. After thinking about his plan, our hero asked the monster to lower his arm. He was still confused by the bleeding from the wounds that led to rigor mortis. After all, if the monster froze at the wrong moment, it would be bad, and Lime realized that he would need to later study the treatment of wounds in lifeless bodies. After all, if he pumped it, will improve the control over the bodies. Immediately after, our hero sent the goblin forward and he went. Although the goblin, and did it quite slowly, but quite bearable. While the monster was walking, Lime thought about the fact that there are strong goblins. There were about 50 high-ranking monsters, and they controlled the rest. If Lime could handle the best ones, it wouldn't be hard to destroy the rest. Meanwhile, the goblin was getting farther and farther away from our hero. Suddenly, Lime realized that he had already moved far enough away, and there was a nearby goblin settlement whose inhabitants should not have seen a dead tribesman. Immediately, our hero ordered his subordinate goblins to stop. He talked to himself about not being the kind of fool who would go into direct confrontation alone. Lime had 10 vials of a dangerous poison that Burial had made. It caused respiratory damage and asphyxiation. It was powerful, so each vial cost 20 gold pieces. This poison didn't work without smoke inhalation, and didn't cause skin contact damage. Remembering all this, our hero handed the vial to the goblin. Lime realized that the poison should be used in such a way that it was not blown away by the wind. And at the same moment, he sent the monster with the vial to the settlement. Then our hero began his role in this battle. Lime once again utilized the weak ghost hand spell. At the moment of casting the spell, he thought that 10 vials could send 1,000 people to the other world. Putting 1 vial into the ghost's hand, Lime thought about what kind of deadly thing Burial had sold it. He sent the weak ghost's hand holding the vial straight into the goblin settlement. Upon reaching it, the hand crashed into a tower right in the middle of the village. This moment mesmerized our hero, and he waited for what would happen next. And then the village burst into flames in a very short time. Out of the house came goblins that were different from those that Lime usually saw, so he could not understand whether they were knights or just warriors. Examining the monsters, our hero realized that the big goblins were about 20 pieces, and each of them had equipment. Sending another hand with poison Lime saw the settlement catch fire with renewed vigor. The poison finally took effect, and the monsters began to suffocate one by one. Suddenly, through his telescope, Lime saw an unusual goblin. This monster looked like a shaman, and was distinguished from the others by a brightly colored costume with feathers and skulls. With a wave of his staff, he summoned a wind that in an instant stopped the fire from spreading through the village. Lime immediately began to think about what abilities he might still have, and whether he was really a priest or a goblin shaman. Even though the fire had stopped, Lime had a plan B, because the goblin he was controlling at that moment had reached the village. The goblin stood calmly at the gate, holding a vial of dangerous substance in his hand. Lime ordered his subordinate to break the bottle of poison. When the poison broke, it caused a blast wave that brought fire and asphyxiation back to the village. Lime was pleased by this event, because it was exactly what he wanted to achieve. He had managed to kill about 100 monsters in one fell swoop, and he hadn't expected such a good result. Now he needed to find out what the high-ranking goblins and the shaman were capable of. He needed to find out what powers they have. Our hero had to carry out the second part of the plan and come to another place. This place was the Archon's Ridge where Lime went. After a while in the forest, there was a loud cry of a huge creature. This creature was a huge ogre that passed by our hero, and seeing him, Lime realized that he would not dare to fight him alone. The ogre at the same time tore a branch from a tree and began scratching its back with it. At that moment, Lime realized that this monster was smart enough to use tools. Our hero realized that the ogre would definitely kill him in a fight, and remembered the words of Uncle St. Dan and the men in the Mercenary Association, who told him that he was too young to fight. On the other hand, Lime also realized that the stronger the ogre, the better the chance that his plan would work. But in the end, he still had the question of how he could catch the ogre. After sitting in the bushes for a while, Lime came up with a great idea. Not far from Lime was a small pack of wolves. and it was them that he was going to use for his plan. First, Lime needed to send all the wolves to the other side of the world. As he began to do so, he aimed his crossbow at the first victim. After a moment, the crossbow bolt hit the wolf right in the center of its head. Without delay, Lime put away his crossbow, drew his melee weapon, and ran towards the wolves. Approaching the animals, our hero cast a spell of Dead Man's Offense, which hit the second victim. The next action, Lime revived one of the wolves with a spell of body control, and with joy on his face ordered this wolf to attack the living. But unfortunately, Lime had absolutely no expectation that this wolf would attack him. After a while of dealing with all the wolves, Lime was looking for a suitable animal, and he seemed to have found a suitable predator because the others didn't fit. Two of them had head injuries and one was not suitable at all because bodies without heads could not move at all. This was because the magic controlled the brain first. Lime realized that next time, the head would have to be left intact. Our hero ordered the animal to stand up, and it barely got up on 4 legs. Next, Lime took a cloth-wrapped piece of meat out of his bag and taped it to the wounded wolf. Our hero examined his subordinate and was satisfied with his work. Immediately afterwards, Lime sent the wolf to walk in front of the ogre. Seeing the wolf, the huge giant promptly chased after him. The raptor was a little faster than the ogre, but not fast enough to run far ahead. Noticing this race, our hero immediately rushed after him. Lime was surprised at how fast the giant was. It was very hard to catch up with him, let alone outrun him. The three of them continued to run faster and faster deep into the forest. The forest was getting thicker, and the ogre was getting harder to run. At some point, he began to tear out roots and branches, throwing them backwards. The ripped out pieces of trees flew straight towards our hero. This made Lime even angrier and surprised him at the same time. The ogre was sharp and strong enough to be able to throw trees. Lime also came to the conclusion that this ogre was different from the usual field monsters, and it was at that moment that our hero's foot caught on one of the tree roots. And at the same moment, Lime, at the speed of screaming, fell to the ground. Looking in front of him, our hero realized that the ogre managed to catch up with the wolf. The ogre easily lifted the animal by the bandages and, standing with his back to Lime, began to eat the wolf. At that moment, Lime realized that he had little time left and had to act quickly. He realized that he could not avoid this part of the plan, and Lime took out his crossbow. He pointed it at the huge monster and said, "Command aim." The crossbow bolt hit the giant right in its broad back, and this event pleased Lime. He was pleased with his marksmanship, but for the monster, this hit did not play a big role, and perhaps he almost did not feel it. Nevertheless, the giant now clearly noticed the presence of our hero, and of course he immediately chased, not after the wolf, but directly after Lime. The huge ogre ran after him, while continuing to throw various parts of trees at him, but Lime was lucky, and nothing hit him. At the same moment, he noticed what he was plotting this plan for. Up ahead was the very goblin village he had begun to destroy with the poison. The goblins were clearly alert as they heard the giant approaching their village, and Lime shouted loudly about the start of the invasion, running up to the borders of the village and pulling out another blue vial from his bag. The goblins in the settlement waiting for them were on alert and had armed themselves beforehand. Lime looked around a bit and began his decisive action. Surrounded by monsters, he opened a blue vial of potion. He immediately drank it in the center of the angry crowd. Lime drank a special potion for acceleration, and now his speed increased several times. But the goblins didn't care and ran towards our hero. Having accelerated several times, Lime could anticipate the goblins' movements and dodge their blows in time. And in this accelerated mode, he saw the goblin priest again. It even seemed to Lime at first that they crossed glances. Trying to get away from the priest, the young man ran out of the village. Our hero managed to do it, and he was able to observe the chaos happening in the village from afar. He wondered if his and the priest's gazes had really crossed, or if he had imagined it. Either way, it was unpleasant for him, and he decided to calm down. And watch the destruction of the village in the distance. At the same time, the giant ogre was dispatching goblins one by one. The goblin warriors tried to inflict as many wounds on him as possible, but he didn't feel them much. Their weapons only lightly scratched the giant's skin, irritating him more and more. At this point, Lime climbed up into a tree and looked down on everyone. He could only summarize everything that was happening with the word chopping, because nothing else fit so neatly. But suddenly something interesting happened. The goblin priest cast a fire spell and directed it at the ogre. A pillar of flame hit the huge monster right on its back, scorching it. The ogre was badly wounded by the fire, but but it kept standing on its feet, scaring the priest terribly. The goblin priest stood in one place and watched as the wounded ogre approached him. The ogre's next target was the priest who had inflicted so many wounds on him. He grabbed a large piece of wood and threw it right at the priest. Then the ogre walked away. Lime continued to look at the settlement and decided to look around to collect bodies and tools for money. After inspecting everything, our hero left, and after a while the priest woke up and was badly wounded. He was alone in the settlement, and it hurt him so much that he cried. After a while, our hero went into the store to Uncle St. Dan, who was very surprised at his appearance. Almost all of Lime's clothes were torn, and overall he looked badly shabby. With a satisfied grin on his face, our hero asked to see his equipment and his new crossbow. The uncle immediately asked what had happened to the young man's crossbow, and he replied that it was broken. Being sure of his words, Lime also noted that all his weapons were broken and needed a sturdy replacement. Money didn't matter to the young man. He also clarified if Uncle was selling a multi-shot crossbow. St. Dan clarified if Lime was looking for a dwarven crossbow, but it didn't matter to the boy. The salesman left and asked the boy to wait for him for a while. The uncle brought out a new 3-shot Slater crossbow and asked if it would suit our hero. Lime calmly agreed to this weapon without showing his emotion. Uncle Saint Den decided to ask Lime if it was true that he had dealt with the lair of the goblins by luring the ogre there. Our hero evaded the answer and asked how the uncle knew this. The interlocutor replied that Belial had found out where the village was. With the help of magic, he decided who managed to destroy the lair. He succeeded and learned that it was the work of Lime. St. Dan decided to ask what secret weapon our hero had, and he replied that he was a magician. Uncle laughed and said that he was very pleased to hear that, and to realize that Lime had matured. Then he did an unexpected thing and decided to give the young man a new crossbow. The uncle gave the crossbow to our hero and listed its characteristics. He also asked him to be careful with it, as the weapon was dear to him. Lime decided to clarify the price once again, to which Saint Don decisively replied that he was giving it to the young man in exchange for the promise to tell him all the stories. Our hero was deeply touched by the words of Uncle and did not know what to say. Lime thanked Saint Dan for the gift, and he said that it would be his reward for his work. Laughing at these words, our hero said that he understood everything. Our hero began to tear apart thoughts about what the reason for the behavior of the uncle. He is an NPC, and his behavior probably reflects the intentions of the Arhat company. Lime also wondered what the point of surviving in this game and his uncle's gift was. Our hero was loaded with these thoughts and became quiet in his worries. St. Dan interrogated Lime as if he hadn't heard what he said. The uncle looked at our hero and asked if he was crying. The young man turned away and pretended as if he had a speck in his eye. Then he added that he would try to be careful from now on. Good-naturedly, St. Dan slapped the boy on the back, chuckling as he did so. It hurt so much that Lime fell to the floor. But he didn't hold a grudge against Uncle, for he hadn't done it on purpose. He took his present and said goodbye and left the store. Walking down the street, he wondered if it was true that he could see at a great distance using magic and who Belial was. And if he is so powerful, his mentor must be even more powerful. He also wondered if the game was taking so long to play and its stock wasn't dropping. After a while, Lime found himself back at the Temple of the Arhat. He wanted to increase his body control. The priest responded positively, and an inscription appeared in the fountain saying that Lime was being trained to control several bodies. Our hero didn't understand why it said multiple bodies and not one. After all, up until this point, he thought that he as a necromancer would be able to create the undead and not just control them. He thought that in other games, necromancers usually have weak curses and their attacks aren't very effective. But this game was very different from the others. It had a lot of new and unusual things. Such innovations for Lime were the acceleration potion and the weak ghost hand. After that, he asked the priest to go to the next level. After a moment, the priest said that Lime had advanced to level 21. Our hero was happy about the level increase, but immediately wanted to improve his magic skills as well. The temple abbot habitually agreed, and Lime's characteristics appeared on the screen. He learned that the magic increased to 16. He also had some iridium left, which meant that his magic level could be raised with it. Lime also suddenly remembered that if you repeat something several times, you can create a skill. And then he thought that in the tower at the Pentajagon of Belial's mentor, he could get a book of magic and learn it. With this book, it would also be possible to learn other types of magic. Walking down the street, Lime thought that since there were no skill limits and no quests in the game, the only thing that mattered was the time spent learning the skills. He realized that all magic is useful, and not only necromancy should be developed. He wondered if Irid depends on the power of defeated enemies. Thinking about the game, Lime realized that here you can't become strong just by huntings like in other games, and you have to move here, like in the real world. This means that it is worth learning not only game techniques, but also combat skills. So it could be, for example, different types of martial arts, or variations and variations of techniques to send enemies to the other side. And in principle, he can continue to learn from experience as he did before. After all, as technology developed, those who knew martial arts in the real world were much more capable in the game because they move better. Therefore, the virtual reality method was developed, and because of this, the game and the real world became very intertwined. Lime also wondered if it was possible to quickly move to the next level just by hunting monsters, or if it only worked with quests. Lime realized that it was impossible to draw conclusions when you didn't know anything. Approaching Bariole, he realized that he was glad to meet him. Going into the room, our hero noticed that he and Bariole had not seen each other for a long time. Running up to Lime, he asked him what he needed this time. Bariole also shared that his teacher said that our hero is very brave. Lime thanked his friend for the compliment and wanted to continue the dialogue with the topic of goblin bodies. But abruptly, Bariole pulled out a certain large pouch from the back room. Immediately, our hero, out of curiosity, decided to find out what it was. Bariole replied that it was Lime's reward money from the whole village for sending the goblins to the other world. The sack contained a fortune of 100 gold coins. Lime was immersed in a sense of shock and incomprehension from this money. After accepting the money, our hero thanked Bariole and thought again that he had apparently completed the quest, even though no one had warned him about it. Then, as if nothing had happened, Lime decided to sell Bariole the lifeless bodies of the goblins he had obtained. After selling the goblins, Bariole decided to ask our hero if it is true that he lured the ogre into their lair. Bariole decided to ask about the acceleration potion and whether the poison had worked as it should. Lime was a little surprised and asked Bariole if he had seen him use the poison. If he answered in the affirmative, it would mean that everyone had seen Lime Necromancer, but Bariole said that he had only seen our hero bring an ogre to the goblin village, and there were signs of poison use. Lime realized that he wasn't caught, but that he had to be more careful from now on, and that magic could help him see what was going on inside the barrier. And Bariole wondered how Lime had achieved all this, and our hero decided to embellish the story. After listening to the whole story, Bariole was in complete delight from Lime's action, and at that moment, our hero decided to find out how much money he had left to pay on the loan. Bariole told him that he had only 20 gold pieces left to pay. Lime immediately handed over 20 gold coins to his friend and closed his bag loan. Having done so, Lime said that he had done a good job. He was talking about the bag that Bariole had made. Although the bag had a simple design, but it was simple and functional, which Lime liked. He also called Bariole handy. These words of our hero again touched Bariole that he could not even believe what he heard. He even asked our hero if he really thought so, and Lime also added to his words that he is also a good magician. Bariole's eyes lit up with joy, and he thanked his friend for such nice words. Lime didn't hesitate long and asked if he had a poison that could send even an ogre to the other side of the world. He thought about it and said that he had poisons, but that they would be stronger if they were treated with magic. However, Bariole said that there was no guarantee that an ogre would die if it ate such a poison. Then Lime asked him if he could make the crossbow stronger with magic, and Bariole recognized it as Uncle St. Dan's weapon. Our hero didn't ask how he knew his weapon, but Bariole said that St. Dan used to brag about it a lot, and if he gave it to him. It means he likes our hero very much. Those words pleased Lime, and he immediately asked if it was possible to strengthen the crossbow with magic. Bariole a little thought, and said that at that moment, his teacher could not improve the crossbow, and his charas himself will be enough for a month at most. But Lime was not confused and decided to find out how much Bariole's work would cost. After a bit of hesitation, Bariole began to tell him that there were some enchantments that could help him. Lime asked him to speed up, which made him nervous and told him that he was bad at enchanting objects, and his main specialty in magic was alchemy. Lime remembered that Bariole had recently made him a freezing box. Bariole replied that it was a simple ice box with magic ice in it. He went on to detail the characteristics of the magic ice, and Lime asked him to stop. He then asked Bariole if he could cast enchantments and how it was possible in principle. The alchemist began a long story about how casting enchantments happens and how it affects weapons. This monologue made our hero regret his question, as Bariole used a lot of obscure words and terms. In the end, he summarized that the cost of such enchantment would be 100 gold pieces. Lime was shocked by this price, provided that it had to be paid every month, and compared it to the price of the bag. Bariole responded by clarifying that the enchantment was more expensive, and that the bag required lower-level magic, and that he had lowered the price of the bag to Lime on friendship. After hearing all these words, our hero asked Burial to slow down, but he also added that thanks to Sandan, he could buy arrows that would cost 10 gold pieces for 100. Lime was angered by Burial's words, since the same arrows could be bought 10 times cheaper from Sandan. But the alchemist clarified that his arrows have magic and can break even stone, and improving the arrows would be cheaper than enhancing the crossbow. He also added that this is the kind of interesting stuff his school sells. One such item is a magic quiver for 2,000 gold. This quiver creates 1,000 magic arrows in a day. On top of that, the quiver is officially registered to its owner, which can protect it from theft. After saying that, Burial asked if our hero would buy such a quiver. For a moment, Lime was even taken aback. He could not imagine giving 2,000 gold pieces for one quiver. But then our hero thought about it and started calculating. If the quiver creates 1,000 arrows a day, then you can sell them for 100 gold pieces and soon be in profit. Burial asked Lime what he was thinking about so smilingly, to which he did not answer. But the smile from the face of our hero quickly came off, as soon as Burial said that the arrows disappear the next day after creation. And it all happens because of the law of mana conservation in the world. So, all created arrows disappear the next day and are created again, and that's why they can't be sold. Hearing this, Lime discarded the idea of buying this quiver. He decided to ask Burial how much the lifeless body of an ogre would cost, and the latter asked if Lime was going to send the ogre to the other world. Burial, at the same moment, reacted very emotionally to the words of our hero. He started shouting that he couldn't do it, and it's dangerous for life, and that our hero didn't even think of approaching the ogre. Lime was taken aback by such an onslaught of words from Burial, and decided not to contradict him. To calm the alchemist, he said that he understood his words. With horror in his eyes, Burial clarified that a lot of people die after meeting an ogre, and last time Lime was just lucky. Our hero repeated his words that he would not go hunting ogres. Burial asked again, as it was important for him to hear a negative answer. He began to talk aloud about what if Lime went to the other world. Before he could finish his sentence, his eyes filled with tears. Trying to calm his friend, Lime added that he was not going to go to the other world, and Burial should not cry. While the alchemist was calming down, Lime thought to himself that he would do it anyway. After a while, our hero asked when Burial would be able to prepare the poison, to which he asked where Lime was going to use it. Relieved, our hero noted that he was going to use it to hunt monsters. He was not going to smear this poison on weapons. He wanted this poison to be able to bring down an ogre if it got inside. Burial began to think about such a poison and said that it would be ready in a week. Next, our hero asked if Burial had a textbook for an introductory course on magic, since he wanted to learn it. These words caused Burial a slight confusion as to why Lime needed such a textbook. The alchemist began to tell him that learning magic requires talent first and foremost, and that Lime couldn't learn it if he just wanted to know more. Our hero was not confused and said that he needed this knowledge for training, and only an introductory course would be enough for him. After listening to him, Burial said that he would try to look for such a book. Burying himself in the books, after a while, he shouted that he had found such a book. Burial smilingly pulled out a huge book on magic from somewhere. This textbook amazed Lime with its size and overall dimensions. The alchemist handed the book to Lime, and he was able to note its heavy weight as well. Burial called the book an introduction to the basics of magic. He said that it contained basic information about the magic of the 5 factions. In order to choose his faction, a student must first familiarize himself with the basics. Our hero asked his friend what the 5 factions were, and Burial reminded that he is a representative of the specialty of alchemy. After a long story, he added that he is a representative of material magic. There's also enchantment magic and elemental magic. Not wanting to listen to Burial completely, Lime interrupted him and said that he would read everything. Our hero also recalled his request in preparing poison to hunt monsters. After all this, he again gave Burial a candy and thanked him for his help. On a positive note, the heroes parted ways, and Lime thought he needed to get ready. Moving into the forest, our hero practiced the Ice Hand spell, but he could not immediately understand whether it worked or not, although his hand glowed blue, but he did not feel the cold energy in his hand. He wondered how mages use their power. Do they just read spells and hold out their hand? Is everything in this world the same as in his usual and familiar games? Soon he decided that this spell was the ability to create something like ice, and decided to move on to learning the next ability. After a while, Lime summarized his progress. He could now control 4 lifeless bodies at once within an hour, and using up a lot of mana. And with small life absorption, he could draw the life energy of grass trees and small animals. This spell could help him heal wounds and relieve fatigue. It acted like an infinite healing potion. The last spell he learned was the Pain Curse, which caused pain to spread throughout the enemy's body. Summoning Lime realized that all these spells had no destructive power, but had their own peculiarities. He also had with him a ready-made poison that Burial had made. This poison worked by inhalation. It was also edible and caused cell necrosis when ingested. All in all, this poison was a pretty dangerous thing for any creature. If ingested by a human, this poison could dissolve the insides in 10 seconds. But then Lime thought that the ogre might have a stomach of steel. If that was true, he'd have to flee. He had with him a potion of acceleration, Burial poison, a dark orb, and a potion of invisibility, and the best place to try out his new skills. He wanted to try out his new skills on Archon Ridge. He had read the Encyclopedia of Monsters and studied everything about them and was ready to go there. Our hero remembered that the day before, he had discovered a village of orcs. The orcs were 2 heads taller than the ogres and were more like giants than ogres, and they were 4 times stronger than humans. However, their hearing and sense of smell were worse than the goblins, so they lived in isolation. That day Lime had decided not to hunt the orcs, as the moment was not right and he had left them behind. But now he was sure the moment was right and he would succeed. Lime was casting a spell sitting in the sun-drenched forest. He smilingly held a small ball in his hands, which was the result of his efforts, and thought that it was like a culinary skill. Having put everything he needed in his bag, Lime decided that it was time to go on his way. Our hero noticed a group of huge orcs walking ahead. Lime counted all of them, and was satisfied that their number was 5, which suited him just fine. Then he shouted to the orcs to come and look at him, and immediately started running away from them. Despite their size, the orcs were as fast as the ogres. They were all hard to run away from. Trying to run harder and harder, our hero realized that the orcs could catch up with him. During this sprint, Lime began to say that while playing Life Edge, he realized one thing. Taking his weapon out of its sheath, he added that the most important thing when hunting the strongest monsters is to attack from afar. Saying this, he threw his dagger towards one of the orcs. After doing this, he continued to run away from the monsters. He realized that it would be hard to send all of them to the other world, but he had a plan, and he stuck to it. Soon he saw a sign left on a tree, and it meant that he was there. It was at this spot that he planned to send the orcs to the other world. One orc was caught in Limp's trap, and a branch was stuck in him. To this branch was tied a rope that was necessary for the plan to capture the orcs. Lime could already feel his plan coming to fruition at that moment. The orcs ran straight to the trap set for them without suspecting anything. The hero was extremely pleased with himself. He was waiting for the right moment to finish catching the orcs. At the right moment, he reached the rope that was stretched nearby. Our hero pulled on it, and at the same moment, the orc trap opened. All 4 orcs fell into the trap that Lime had prepared. Satisfied with himself, the young man kept the orcs in the hanging trap for a while longer, and after a while he suddenly released it, which the orcs did not expect. He did this to suddenly shoot them with his crossbow, and his hands were free. Lime took aim and shot accurately, hitting all the targets he had planned. Now all 4 orcs lay lifelessly in front of our hero. Having done all this, Lime lay down on the ground with his weapon in his hands to catch his breath. He was satisfied that his plan had worked as he had planned. When he got up after a while, he realized that he couldn't afford to rest for long now, as there was a lot of work ahead of him. After a while, he dragged all the orcs into the cave, and was ready to start executing his plan. After checking all his equipment, Lime was sure he had enough. He began to speak a spell that would subdue the orcs' bodies to his orders. All 4 monsters obeyed his commands without hesitation, and Lime himself knew that he had prepared everything perfectly, and his plan was flawless. Our hero impregnated the orcs with herbs to get rid of the smell of dead bodies. He also put a bottle of poison inside each of them and sewed them up. After all these manipulations, he looked at the exit of the cave, and making sure that the weather was good, he decided to move out. Finally, Lime spotted his target. He saw a giant ogre sleeping under a tree. It was the ogre he had forced to attack the goblin settlement. The ogre had a keen sense of smell, and almost woke up when he smelled Lime, who had to quickly hide in the tree. Sitting on top of the tree, our hero realized that the climax of his plan had come, and the orcs under his command began to approach the huge ogre. It was obvious from the giant that his sleep was not strong, and he clearly smells the approach of the warriors. This was understandable because ogres have a very good sense of smell, but it was not the right time to think about the ogre's sense of smell, and one of the orcs raised his weapon against the giant. The first orc struck the ogre with his weapon, leaving him with a large wound, but this did not kill the giant. It only angered him, and he struck his first blow. This blow felled 2 of the 4 orcs at once, scaring Lime. Seeing this made our hero uncomfortable because he lost 2 fighters too quickly. The ogre was furious at what was happening, and Lime realized that the ogres and orcs have a big difference in strength, and it seemed the orcs couldn't win. The enraged huge ogre looked at the remaining 2 orcs, and Lime realized that he needed to send the giant to the other world as soon as possible. Our hero uttered the curse of the ghostly hand as he changed his plan. Lime knew that his good trait was being prepared for unforeseen circumstances, and then he put poison into the ghost hand. At the same moment, our hero saw the ogre easily crush one of the orcs with his foot. This horrified Lime because he only had an ogre to defeat, and there was no way he could lose to him, so he ordered the orc to fall down. The orc quickly and obediently did what our hero ordered him to do. At the same time, Lime stood and watched how the events would develop further. The huge ogre took the fallen orc by the head and brought him to his mouth. Our hero immediately realized that he was going to eat the orcs. In principle, it was to his advantage because inside the orcs was poison, but the ogre decided to do it differently. Lime saw the giant pulling the orc in different directions with 2 hands, wanting to see what was inside. A poison capsule fell out of the orc, right onto the ground in front of the giant. Lime didn't understand how the giant discovered this, whether he smelled the poison or the odor of the glass. But Lime didn't have time to think about it. He had to aim and fire. Our hero's shot hit its target in the vial of poison. The vapors of the poison began to rise upward, enveloping the monster. Finally, they reached the ogre's nose and penetrated its respiratory system. The poison penetrated the ogre's body, and it began to scream violently in pain. Lime was pleased because everything worked quickly and clearly. It was time to act, and our hero sent a ghostly hand with poison towards the ogre. It also hit the target and flew into the giant's open mouth. To avoid air poisoning, Lime tied a cloth over his nose, but he was still not sure how to proceed. He decided to take a few more arrows and douse them with the rest of the poison. Now he had to aim again and shoot at the enemy. The bolts hit the giant's arm and continued to pour the poison into his body. Lime decided to stop and watch the further actions of the ogre, and in that moment, our hero realized that the giant had spotted him, and now he had no choice but to flee. Running away from the ogre, Lime caught himself thinking that it all looks very creepy. Then he remembered that he had a black potion in his bag. This potion absorbs all the light around him and makes it dark as night, and Lime threw it under the ogre's feet. The monster stopped to watch the darkness spread around him. However, he was not frightened and grabbed the nearest tree, which he easily ripped out of the ground and threw at the boy. Lime tried his best to dodge the flying piece of wood, but our hero was unlucky and the wood threw him to the ground. Quickly regrouping, Lime stood up and realized how lucky he was, but he didn't have time to think and immediately had to run away from the monster again. He realized that if he continued like that, the ogre would kill him, and at that moment, Lime started to pronounce a curse of pain, which he wanted to direct at the ogre. Not realizing what was happening, our hero wondered if his curse had worked. And after a moment, Lime realized that the ogre had a strong resistance to magic. Then he began to remember what he'd read in the monster encyclopedia. His thoughts about what could help him were interrupted by a sound from behind him. Lime turned around and saw something that didn't bode well. The angry ogre struck the ground so hard that the air rumbled with its power. The ogre's fists were smoking, and he was looking right at our hero, which was a very bad sign for him. Lime began to run faster, and thought of ways to send the ogre to the other side of the world. As he ran away, he asked himself rhetorical questions about when the poison would work. The ogre threw rocks and branches at the young man, which took away his health. Lime slowly realized that he couldn't take it much longer, and realized that he had to take decisive action. He stopped and looked at the giant, not realizing what else he could do to destroy the ogre. And then in an instant, our hero had a great idea. At the same moment, the ogre swung and hit Lime with his fist. He did it so hard that our hero flew to a tree. Lime felt that his body was at its limit, and the ogre at this moment was at the peak of his animal rage. Our hero did not understand how long the giant would resist. Then Lime realized that the ogre had only one right eye left, which means that it is necessary to deprive him of sight completely. Our hero took out a small dagger, took aim, and threw it at the ogre's head. The dagger reached its target at some point, slowing down time. The ogre fell and was defeated. And Lime couldn't believe his eyes. He had emerged victorious from this battle. He was so relieved by this realization that he even laughed. Our hero immediately wanted to brag about his victory and invite people to look at the lifeless ogre, but something made him suspicious. From the thick of the forest at that moment, a pair of red eyes looked at Lime. A goblin priest from the very first settlement came out of the thicket and asked the hero if he was not too early to rejoice in his victory. Our hero did not recognize him at once and asked who he was. The goblin called Lime a bad man because of him died. All those who loved the goblin went to the other world. Lime ruined all his tribe without leaving a single living soul. He asked our hero why he did it. The priest also asked why he had ruined him too. What was the point of it? Our hero stood silently and did not know what to say to the lifeless shaman speaking to him. Thinking over what was happening, he came to the conclusion that the priest had become undead, and then asked him if he had come to thank Lime. The priest began to lose his temper, not understanding why he could thank him. And then the undead changed his face and answered Lime that he had given him a good idea. The goblin priest sarcastically told our hero that he would not only thank him, but even give him a gift. This gift was the goblins that the goblin priest revived a moment later. The monsters were badly wounded before their deaths, as some of them were missing body parts or had deep wounds. Lime realized that these goblins had been turned into undead, but he didn't understand one thing: how the undead priest had gotten his own abilities when he was alive, or how they had awakened so quickly. All options looked bad. The shaman said that Lime must accept his gift, which would spell doom for him. Moments later, the priest ordered the rebel goblins to tear our hero to shreds. The priest cast his final spell, summoning more goblins. A bunch of lifeless goblins ran after our hero at the same moment. Lime once again confirmed that the situation he was in was extremely bad. At the same second, he rushed forward from the goblins and decided that he needed to run to the orc village as soon as possible. The shaman gloated and shouted at Lime to run while he could, but one day he would get tired. Lime ran and realized that the goblins running after him were too fast. He kept running and running, realizing that he was getting worse. Our hero's body was getting heavier and heavier and running. He didn't understand how it happened that he was tricked around his finger. He was getting harder and harder to run, and if this continued, there would be nothing left of his fighting power. And then he thought that he had never contemplated his doom, and at that moment, he thought that he might actually die. Gathering his thoughts, Lime firmly decided that this couldn't be his end. He still had some potions left that could help him stay alive. Our hero was determined that he would survive by all means. Abruptly, he noticed that something strange started to happen around him. Lime's body suddenly became perceptibly lighter, and it became easier for him to run. At that moment, the goblin priest was casting another incomprehensible spell. Our hero was already starting to get annoyed with this incomprehensible goblin magic. The priest finished saying his spell, and everything around him was flooded with purple light. This time, Lime was sure that it did not bode well for him. The rebel goblins crouched down, and their eyes glowed purple. Our hero noticed that they accelerated and began to run much faster. More goblins appeared from the bush, which were probably there from the beginning. Lime had no choice but to get into a fight with these goblins. Holding on tightly to his weapon, our hero launched a super attack against his enemies. The battle was just beginning to enter its climax, which our hero met face to face, and the rebel goblins continued to advance and surround Lime. At some point, he broke out of the encirclement and noticed that his entire back is riddled with abrasions and wounds. Abruptly, the goblin priest again cast a spell that caused an explosion behind Lime's back. This explosion signaled a fireball that flew straight at our hero. Lime obviously did not expect to see such a thing and tried to run even faster. This ball with a rumble fell to the ground, but Lime did not manage to look at it. He only wanted to rush forward. Immediately after that, he remembered that he had a potion of acceleration left in his bag. Lime drank it, and immediately his speed increased several times, but he still realized that he was not in the best condition, and he would not be able to run faster. A glimmer of hope appeared in Lime's eyes as he saw the point of his salvation. In front of him appeared a settlement of orcs to which he was running. Our hero felt that the potion would soon expire, and if he made a mistake, he would be finished. And at this time, on the wall surrounding the settlement, stood an orc who noticed the approaching hero and the goblins behind him. The orc on the top of the wall started shouting, warning his fellows of the approaching trouble. Running closer and closer, Lime felt the last of his strength leaving him. And then our hero stopped because he felt something wrong. Orcs started throwing stones at the goblins running after him, which was good for Lime. Dodging the stones, Lime was glad that he was still on the ground. But the next moment, he heard again the screams of the orcs who were now also hunting him. The orcs began to quickly surround our hero on one side and the goblins on the other. Immediately, Lime decided to drink a potion of invisibility, and he became completely invisible to all the enemies around him. This was the moment when he had to run faster than ever, and our hero decided to leave the fight with the goblins to the orcs. But Lime had completely forgotten about one enemy he had crushed. He had forgotten about the giant ogre he had sent to the other world recently. Gritting his teeth, Lime decided to leave the place, which did not bode well for him. After a while, Uncle St. Dan asked Lime what had happened to him. It was a logical question, as he looked very shabby. And then Uncle seemed to realize what had really happened to the young man. St. Dan saw the badly scratched crossbow he had recently given to Lime. He couldn't understand what could have happened in a couple of days to make such a thing happen. In response to this, our hero shouted that the problem was far from the crossbow. Uncle asked what the problem was, Nervously, our hero shouted that the main problem was the appearance of the undead. Saint Dan was surprised by these words, and he was silent in thought, waiting for the story of the boy. Lime told his story, and added that when he was running away he felt the curse stop working on him gradually. Along the way he also healed himself with potions to relieve his fatigue. Plus he figured that if the priest lost to the orcs he wouldn't stop chasing Lime. Saint Dan listened that the undead were not a danger to Lime in the city, but that didn't mean it had to be kept secret. Uncle was surprised by this story, and began asking questions about the number of the uncle and their connection to the land of perdition. Lime thought it had nothing to do with that cursed land and out loud named the culprit. It was a goblin shaman. Saint Dan didn't understand what our hero was talking about, but he explained that a little earlier he had destroyed the goblin village where the priest lived, and added that he was now relentlessly resurrecting goblins. This news clearly did not please Uncle. He advised Lime to go to the magic tower and ask for advice there. After all, it turned out that since the goblin shaman himself became an evil, then he put a curse on himself and others, and it is not normal. Saint Dan sent Lime to the tower and said he needed to clean up the store. Our hero listened to his uncle's advice to find out as much information as possible and headed for the magic tower. He was met by Burial, who, like Saint Dan, was curious as to why Lime looked so shabby. He even asked him who he had fought with if he looked so bad. Calmly, our hero answered that he had only overdone it a little in the battle. Then Lime asked where Sir Belial was, to whom he had important business. Burial said that he needed to heal his wounds first. Our hero didn't want to hear anything about his wounds. He was going to treat them later, and at that moment, he urgently needed Belial. Burial did not calm down, and wanted to clarify why he needed his teacher. Suddenly, the friend's squabble was interrupted by the appearance of the mage who said he had already returned. By the tattoo on his arm, Lime realized that it was Belial. Burial changed his face and bowed to his teacher, asking if his exit was successful. The mage himself greeted our hero by name and introduced himself, even though he was sure that Lime knew his name. And our hero knew the whole lore of this character. He knew the history of his family and that he was talented and the best student of Pentragon. He also remembered that only 3,000 people use magic in the kingdom, and only 15 have the dual rank of mages. If Belial had such a rank, the structure of magical power in the kingdom would be changed. Returning from his thoughts, Lime said hello and introduced himself in return. Belial told him that the young man's fighting style surprised him greatly. He was agile for a warrior and heavy for a hunter at the same time. Lime decided to ask if the mage had recognized this just by looking at him. The mage replied that looking at the young man made it clear Belial had a hobby of resting and watching the forest. He immediately realized that the orcs had gotten in because of the warning sound of the barrier. After that, the mage asked Lime why he had come to the magic tower. Our hero did not hesitate to tell the whole story in detail. After listening to Lime's story from beginning to end, Belial finally decided to clarify whether it was true that goblins and orcs had turned into evil. He wondered if it could be because of the orc village. Belial speculated aloud that Lime's use of magic might have awakened the village's curse. It could have happened because of the defense spell, and the fact that the goblin priest had cursed himself to become an undead meant that he had experienced intense resentment and hatred. After summarizing everything, Belial decided that he would have no problem explaining to our hero what to do next. Lime thanked the mage for that. In response, he clarified that the city should be safe now. Belial also promised that if someone enters the barrier, he will tell our hero about it. The next moment, Belial turned to Burial, who looked at his teacher in surprise. The mage said he would leave the rest to his student and left. After a moment of flashing brightly, Belial teleported away. Burial turned to Lime in surprise and clarified that he had never seen his teacher talk so much. He added that he usually spoke in short sentences and ended the dialogue quickly. After saying this, Burial offered to fix his crossbow for Lime. He said that there is magic that can repair small scratches and breakages, which our hero was very happy about. The alchemist at the same moment took the crossbow and began to cast a repair spell. In turn, Lime told him that he had something for him. Our hero handed him a fresh peanut candy that promised to be very tasty. Burial was very happy with this candy, and he thanked Lime for it. Our hero went to the exit, realizing that he had finished all the work in the magic tower, and said goodbye to the alchemist. A familiar voice welcomed Lime to the temple and asked him what he wanted, so he came to the temple of the Arhat again. Our hero again told the priest that he would like to improve his skills in the game. The priest waved his hand and Lime's characteristics appeared on the water in the fountain. He looked at his skills and thought that he should definitely upgrade before the battle, but he didn't know which skills were more important to him. Lime reasoned about improving his aiming fire and necromancy skills and couldn't decide which one to improve. He realized that it was important to decide which one one to improve, because the damage of each ability was different and could be used in different situations. Lime said out loud that he would like to improve 5 of his skills. The priest clarified that he had so many elides that he could improve all of his skills. Lime realized that his skills were still weak, but he could improve them a bit. And then he noticed that 2 skills were written in gray instead of blue. The priest said that he had reached the level to learn these spells, but was not familiar with them yet. The 2 gray skills were resurrection and control over lifeless bodies. The priest added that there were enough elides to learn them as well. Lime confirmed that he wanted to learn those skills as well, which the priest agreed with. They both looked at the water, and in a moment, these skills were colored blue. Our hero wondered if he could create undead with the resurrection skill, as well as the goblin priest did. Expanding this thought, Lime thought that in this case, all of these undead will become his subordinates. At the priest, our hero asked if he could raise his level, but unfortunately he didn't have enough elides for that. But on the other hand, Lime raised his magic level and improved his spells. Now he wanted to take a little break. The priest again escorted him to the large basement with the capsules, and Lime lay down in a vacant capsule, closed his eyes, and logged off. He woke up in his home in the Peace Walker water capsule. He felt uncomfortable waking up in that liquid every time. Without much thought, Lime got up, got dressed, and walked over to his computer. He decided to check if the money had come to him, and everything was correct. But he still wasn't happy with the result, as he wanted more. He was relieved that he was able to earn about 200,000 won from the game, even though he would only have 100 won left after paying the utility bills. He also thought that it wasn't enough money, and he should have caught the ogre next time. He also noticed that because of the penalty for deleting a character after death, the price had increased and was around 130,000 won for 1 gold. But it was too much of a loss to delete a character. Lime assumed that the game would become more popular because of the total immersion. It was because of this that the creators decided to cut down on the number of players. After all, a person could live a second life in the game. Poking around the internet, Lime saw new features in Life Edge. So, with the keyword production, technology could create a skill. Characteristics and skills could be improved using elides. Elides were automatically accumulated in different amounts according to the player's decision. Elides could be used to level up, and the priest could only be spoken to in Korean so he could understand. The stats increased by themselves through repetitive action. After learning all this new information, Lime decided to log back into the game. He noticed that day had already changed to night, and it was getting dark. Even though he had been away from the game for about an hour, about 7 hours had passed. Our hero walked down the street and thought about whether it was pointless to pump characteristics with points if it could be done with elides. It would make the game too easy. There were 3 ways to spend elides, and Lime didn't understand which one was more profitable for him. But now he was left with one of his main pressing questions. He didn't know what to do with the goblin shaman. Lime was not afraid that the priest would come to the village because there were hunters and a strong mage. He was afraid that he would not be able to see such a strong opponent in the game again. Lime came to the conclusion that he needed to learn the basics of magic as soon as possible before the next appearance of the goblin. A week later, Lime sat on his bed and thought about the fact that the priest had not shown up in 7 days. Our hero occasionally went to Belial and asked if anyone had damaged the barrier. He did not believe that everything was so simple and quiet because of the calm before the storm. In the meantime, Lime continued to study the basics of magic and came across one very interesting fact. He realized that magic and skills could be used thanks to elides, but to truly wield them, you had to learn spells and control mana. This magic was a deviation from the norm, and previously it could only be mastered with the help of elides. Lime decided to call this magic a skill magic. In this, he was helped by the memory of the goblin shaman's curse. Lime had strong and unusual magical powers that he had figured out how to use after meeting with the priest. To use it, one had to concentrate and gather strength in the body. Then you had to concentrate the mana in one place, and as if to collect it in your hand and visualize it spreading through the air. Then it is necessary to imagine mana moving in the air in a certain direction, after which it should take the form of infinity. So, it should move and rotate that, can further cause an explosion or magic. Describing this process was easy for Lime, but it was much harder to execute. But in the book, there were tips on moving magic basic formulas and methods that helped our hero. Lime decided to start practicing again. He remembered that there were 5 factions in total. These were the systems of charm, magic illusion, magic, elemental magic, transformation, magic, and magic items. Each faction had its own magic skill. Originally, Lime was going to learn all 5 types of magic, but he could only learn 2 because he could not use magic for more than 10 minutes. Otherwise, Lime would catch fire or something else would happen to him. After learning direct attack magic, he decided to learn 2 spells with amplification. This was how he managed to acquire essence enhancement and enchantment. The first is to increase the strength of metal, wood, or stone. The second is to give an item the power to block attacks with mana. Both spells could last an hour, and Lime wasn't sure about mastering them because of the waste of Elides due to the short duration. After a while, Lime stepped onto the training ground. It was at that moment that it was time for our hero's training. With his weapon, he chopped the training stand long and hard. Lime didn't even notice how dark it got. He was tired, so he went to eat and sleep in order to get to the temple early tomorrow. In the morning, he was already at the temple and looked at his stats. In a week of training, his magic strength, endurance, and 5 senses had increased by 1. Additionally, in 7 days, Lime had managed to learn 3 cooking skills. These were making shaptangash, kochikui, and candy. But on the other hand, he was so tired of waiting in the village and doing nothing that he thought it would be faster to hunt down and kill the goblin. But Lime's problem was a complete lack of money. Our hero needed to be ready to meet with the shaman, but there was no money to buy magic equipment. He immediately thought about whether it was possible to earn them somehow. And then, as usual, Lime came up with an interesting idea. Our hero went outside the village into the woods to an abandoned settlement. Even though the village was abandoned, there were no less orcs in it. Lime even came to the conclusion that the orcs had won, and perhaps that was the reason why the shaman had not appeared for a week. This thought was unlikely, though, because the shaman would not have had the presence of mind to do so, and was probably running away and hiding somewhere. Lime walked into an abandoned settlement and saw a pile of scattered bones. Startled, our hero realized one thing. In front of him was a huge altar. There was no flesh on the scattered bones, and there were no insects nearby. It was strange and even looked like magic, but not magic. Our hero remembered that he had heard of orcs being cannibalistic. Orcs believed that they could gain great power by eating the flesh of the strongest. It occurred to him that he had a way to get a good army. After all, the undead are undead. Lime began gradually over the next few days to collect the bones in his camping bag, and at one point he realized that he had never seen orcs in this place. They didn't go far from their shelter, and so there couldn't be frequent encounters with them. Thinking about it, Lime realized that it was time for him to return to the altar because he had a lot of work to do. When all the preparations were over, our hero decided to start the spell. He began to say the spell, and everything around him began to glow purple. At the end of the spell, Lime said that the dead man's sculpture should rise, and something strange started to happen. Our hero could not believe what he had done. 2 bright red lights lit up in the eye sockets of the orc's skull. The monster's huge skeleton rose to its full height in front of our hero, and Lime was finally glad that he had gotten what he had been working towards for so long. But suddenly he realized something was wrong. The rebel orc ran with an attack straight at Lime on his master. This action only meant that our hero would have to try again. Taking a firm grip on his weapon, Lime sent the undead flying back. Our hero immediately realized that the undead's attack was clearly connected to one of the skills. That skill was power over the dead, even though it was a passive skill. All Lime had to do was try to become an undead commander again. After resurrecting the next orc with a spell, Lime decided to do things a little differently. He strengthened his necromancer magic and the orc became calmer. Noticing this, Lime decided that everything was as it should be. But after a moment, the orc started to run at our hero again with an attack. After destroying the undead a second time, he realized that the orc was attacking when the mortal magic expires. Disappointed, Lime sat in the forest and pondered why the same thing happens every time. He thought that the necromancer's magic alone might not be enough. And then, as usual, our hero had an idea. He decided to use the skill of controlling many powerful lifeless bodies. Once again, a lifeless orc skeleton rose up in front of Lime and asked him to hit the tree, and the skeleton went to do his bidding. Our hero realized that the right to control the undead had passed to him, but it would not last long. Since he didn't know exactly what would happen next, he decided that he needed to be on guard. Looking at the skeleton performing the task, Lime realized that he had succeeded and ordered it to stop. This pleased Lime, because the fact that the orc obeyed for a long time meant development. On the 5th day of our hero's experiment, he was in control of 30 orc skeletons. The total number of dead with the control of many powerful bodies was equal to 10, hence the total power of the army of 40 dead men. Our hero realized that he wouldn't be able to control more skeletons, so he would stop at this number. 40 skeletons was a small army. In the process of creating it, Lime found out that multiple magic can be applied to the undead in a complex way. With such an army, Lime could not overthrow a tribe of orcs, but he could defeat a handful of scouts and conduct a safe hunt. He had also accumulated enough Elides in 5 days that he wanted to spend them on raising the level of power over the dead. He remembered that in previous games, necromancers called the undead their subordinates. but even with a wizard level, you could summon about 30 undead heads. And in this game, Lime could already do that. And from now on, the number of his subordinates would grow and increase into an immortal army. But first of all, our hero needed to send a goblin shaman to the TT Light. After a while, Lime decided to test his army on a mad troll. The monster ran after Lime to a certain place where our hero left his army. At one point, he broke free and ordered his subordinates to attack the troll. When the skeletons diverted their attention to themselves and began to attack the enemy, Lime was able to load his weapon and take aim. The troll at this point was calmly looking directly at our hero. Lime safely was able to take aim and fire a shot directly at the enemy. The shot was made, and it was accurate because our hero hit the troll in the head. Lime also noted that this shot was perfectly made. Immediately afterwards, our hero decided to see if the troll had gone to the other side. However, it was dangerous to approach the troll with bare hands because it could be alive. The troll seemed lifeless at first glance, and Lime approached it closer. He thought of the shaman again. He had been searching for him for a week without success. He realized that the probability that such an intelligent NPC was killed by an ordinary monster was extremely low. As he picked up his weapon, Lime distracted himself from his thoughts about the shaman and began to think about the price for the troll's head. He also remembered that troll blood is more valuable than ogre blood, because it is more often added to potions and potions. As he collected the loot, he thought that he would exchange half of it for equipment and the rest for cash. Having put all the loot in his bag, our hero decided to return to the city. Suddenly, he heard a strange sound and started looking around. There were a lot of monsters covered with wool. They were jabaku. These monsters looked like real monkeys. Lime could not understand why they were here, and if they had smelled the troll's blood. Immediately, our hero began to speak a spell to summon a weak ghostly hand. When the spell took effect, he ordered the hands to follow his orders and grab the monsters. Hearing our hero's order, the ghost hands activated, and they flew to grab the many monsters that attacked Lime. Our hero also had to prepare for a fight with the jabaku. Lime drew his weapon and engaged the first monster that approached. Another monster he had to push away from him with his foot. Moments later, Lime shouted to his subordinates to send the jabaku to the other side, and they obediently followed. At the same moment, the ghostly hands also began to catch up with the monsters. Lime also kept up with his subordinates and ghost hands engaging in battle with the monsters. The skeletons and our hero were sending the jabaku to the ground where the ghostly hands were bringing them down. Lime clearly felt his superiority in this fight and asked the monsters to attack him. A while later in the magic tower, Burial asked if our hero had brought a troll. The alchemist could not understand how Lime had managed to catch a troll, but he replied that he had only used traps and a crossbow. Barioli was surprised by the words of our hero, because it is hard for even a high-ranked hunter to survive a troll encounter, let alone win. Lime grinned and replied that he had sent 2 more to the other side of the world, but they didn't fit in the bag and became a snack for the jabaku. Bariol admired our hero's deeds and stories about them, but in the end, Lime was more interested in how much money he would get for the troll. The alchemist asked if the troll's body was damaged and if the blood had already clotted, to which our hero nodded. Lime explained that the body was damaged due to the lack of space in the bag, and that it could not be avoided. After calculating everything, Barial concluded that he could buy the troll for 200 gold pieces. Lime was shocked by this price for a troll, and immediately did not believe it, and asked again. The alchemist replied that he couldn't pay more. The alchemist replied that he couldn't pay more than that for a damaged troll, and asked how much he could pay for a whole troll. Lime agreed to 200 gold coins. But he asked Bariole for the price of a whole troll, and he replied that a whole troll would cost 1,000 gold pieces. This price excited Lime. Bariole explained that the cost of a troll was based on the fact that its body could be used to make 100 healing potions. Each potion was in high demand and sold for 50 gold pieces. This potion was also used as fuel, and as an ingredient for more expensive potions. So the demand was high. This demand was from monster hunters and mercenaries. This potion was difficult to make because of the troll, and the price would only go up. At that moment, Lime realized why mages were so rich, while ordinary people could only earn 20 gold in a month. The mages created items necessary for life, and sold them expensively. It happened that, because of the high cost, only the rich could buy them. The magicians created a monopoly where all wealth revolved around them. Looking through the list of what Lime could buy, he counted about 30 kinds of potions. Of all of them, our hero only used 10 kinds of potions. After reading all of them, he asked Bariole if he had hydrochloric acid for sale. The alchemist answered in the affirmative, and added that this acid is used when hunting trolls. He assumed that Lime did the same. When the acid came in contact with the troll's skin, it would immediately melt it. The weapon would then be stuck into the area. Bariol asked if that was how Lime killed the troll with an arrow. Our hero calmly replied that he had just used magic. Bariol muttered that the use of magic explains everything, and then he wondered how Lime could have used magic. He didn't understand how it could happen, to which our hero replied that he had simply learned it. He added that he had gone over the basics a few times and practiced a bit. Bariol's face combined emotions of both surprise and admiration. Lime asked him if he could still give him hydrochloric acid. When he came to his senses, Bariol confirmed that he could. Our hero also asked him to sell him equipment, namely a strong defense and a life preserver. Bariol said it would cost 150 gold pieces. Lime gave the money for the equipment and asked if he could infuse them with magic himself. Still in shock, Bariol didn't know what to say. To bring the alchemist to his senses, Lime offered him a homemade candy as usual. Bariol was pleased with it and remembered that he also had a gift for our hero. The alchemist handed him a small round talisman on a string. Lime didn't immediately understand what it was and asked Bariol about it. He answered our hero that it was a talisman that would protect him from danger because Bariol was so afraid of his friend's death. Lime was again touched by Bariol's words as if he was not an ordinary NPC. Our hero accepted the talisman and thanked the alchemist for the gift. Taking it in his hands, he realized that Bariol had made it with his own hand. Once again thanking the alchemist for the gift, Lime said goodbye to him and left the magic tower. He still needed to take care of all his business to finally catch the goblin shaman. He used almost all the elides to increase his magic level and learn every spell to control the dead. But his magic power was still at level 9, and when he needed money, Lime followed the following plan. He would leave the game and find someone who needed the game money. Then he'd make a deal where Lime would give the customer in-game money and the customer would give him real money. On one of these deals, Lime went to Bariol again for a transfer. And as usual, he was very friendly and happy to see our hero again. In response to this, Lime asked for another sending of money. Through him, our hero always did it, and this time he asked Bariol to send 30 gold pieces to the man with the name Invincible Circle. Saying this, Lime thought that for 30 gold pieces, he could get 3 million won in cash. At the same moment, Bariol seriously asked if Invincible Circle was his real name, to which Lime said it was just a code word. Our hero, after the magic tower, returned to the forest again. He came to the place where he hid the bones of his subordinates, and with a spell made them rise again. And in a moment, the skeletons rose from the ground at Lime's command. Each time, our hero was pleased that he was able to do it. Immediately, he ordered the skeletons to follow him. They wandered around for an hour, and Lime learned a lot about monsters and their relationships. The Jabaku, though they always walk together in groups, do not attack ogres, trolls, or goblins. And when Lime placed 2 orcs, 3 Jabaku trolls, and 2 goblins next to each other, they were calm and did not attack each other. However, this was only the tip of the iceberg of monsters that Lime knew. After all, there were rumors that there were about 100 different kinds of monsters in the game, and he saw only 4. After some time in front of our hero was a few new monsters that he had not seen before. And after a while in front of him appeared the monster he was waiting for. It was a goblin shaman. Lime was very surprised to meet him among the monsters unknown to him. He even wondered if he had interfered in their fight in order to take revenge. But on the other hand, the shaman could not know that Lime was there. Lime began to cast a light ghostly hand spell. Also, to the spell he added that after concentrating the magic it should be dispersed. Then he said that the almighty mana should manifest its great power and share magic with him. Lime knew that concentrating his consciousness for 10 minutes would be difficult, but he had no choice. He needed to get used to this state as quickly as possible. Finally, he was ready to attack the goblin shaman. A group of skeletons subordinate to him ran to attack the shaman. In the next instant, the goblin realized Lime's presence in this fight. After a few attacks, the goblin began to speak a spell in his language, causing it to ignite. Lime was surprised by what he saw. He didn't understand what was happening, or why the shaman was on fire. And the shaman kept saying his spells, and at some point our hero realized what was happening. The goblin shaman wanted to subdue his skeletons, and Lime decided to act. He activated his aim shooting skill. Aiming at the shaman, he cocked his ranged weapon. Immediately, 3 arrows flew at the flaming goblin, but with the help of his magic, the shaman broke them, and they did not have time to reach him. The goblin continued to speak new spells in his language. This he began to frighten our hero more, because he did not understand what was happening. After a while there was an explosion, and the monsters around with red eyes turned to Lime. Lime realized that now it was time to run away from this place. He shouted to his skeletons to come back for him. Lime knew that his incarnation skill level was still low, and if he lost control of his thoughts, he would be lost. Running away, he was frustrated at the thought that he wasn't strong enough to fight the shaman yet, and there was nothing he could do about it. As he continued his escape from the shaman, Lime also had to dodge the fireballs flying at him. He thought of taking advantage of this, but realized that now was not the time, and he had to wait. He decided to count the skeletons, and there were 20 of them. Lime decided that the shaman had sent the undead from the front lines to capture him. It was strange because one could not underestimate the strength and skills of the orcs. Our hero could not be underestimated in such a case. This could not be done because Lime used high-level magic, and he didn't understand why, even with it, he couldn't defeat the ogres. Finally, Lime realized that although he couldn't do it with external attacks, he could definitely poison them with poison. At some point, he realized that he had already run far enough and slowed down, but when he turned around, he realized that he could still hear orcs screaming nearby. Lime noticed that they had not fallen far behind him, and were still close by, and then he saw that the eyes of these orcs were different from the normal ones. Their eyes were burning red. This meant that these monsters were magi orcs. And then Lime realized that the last time the goblins fought, it wasn't just about numbers, but that too. The power of the shaman was slowly dissipating, and Lime decided to drink a potion of invisibility. And then our hero disappeared for all the enemies surrounding him at that moment. With anger in his voice, Lime thought about the shaman, that he is an offended dead man, and in retaliation to him, he will subdue the power of bloody offense shaman, and take away the goblin's control over the undead. Lime began to cast a spell. This spell is to cast an order of multiple enhanced control over the body of the undead, and all the undead that was under the goblin's control passed to Lime. The goblin shaman tried to dodge the monster's blows, but at some point, the shaman began to cast a new spell while dodging the arrows of Lime. Our hero realized what the goblin wanted to do, and he shouted to stop. But the goblin naturally did not intend to do so, and continued his own. At the end of the spell, all of Lime's subordinates stopped responding to his commands and fell on their backs. It was a shock for our hero, and he could not explain what kind of magic it was. But he couldn't think for long, because he had to attack. Between him and the shaman was about 20 meters, and Lime was figuring out how to start an attack against the enemy. He started with the goblins subordinate to the shaman and continued with the ogres. Lime was very lucky and was able to hit the ogre several times and evade its blows, but the goblin shaman continued his sorcery and sent a fireball at our hero. Lime managed to dodge, and the fire only spoiled his cloak, but did not hurt his skin. Our hero decided to anger the shaman even more, and started a conversation with him. He sarcastically asked him if this was all he was capable of. Angrily, the shaman wished Lime dead, and said that he would make him a servant and torture him for eternity, and finally shouted the word, Nata. Lime had no idea what the shaman's last word meant. After that, their personal fight began, during which Lime thought he had to endure a little more. The fight continued, and our hero was getting more and more difficult. But at one point everything changed, and Lime managed to pin the shaman. He shouted to him to come out to fight him one-on-one. With one crushing blow, Lime crushed the shaman into the ground and thought it was finally over. But the shaman managed to get up, and our hero swung his weapon and went on the attack again. This battle involved many monsters from one side or the other. After a while, the shaman flew high and dived to hit Lime. Our hero noticed something strange, as if the shaman had been hiding some of his ability until now. In a fit of rage, the shaman shouted that even if Lime tried to take his life, he wouldn't succeed, because he couldn't die. And whatever our hero did, the shaman would survive, because it was the last wish of his Donson. Without really listening to the words, Lime was wondering if his strength had run out, or if the shaman had gotten stronger. The fight continued, and the shaman shouted a new spell. He summoned many orcs from the village that was nearby and said that now it was Lime's turn. At that moment, our hero realized that it was time to use the ring and bracelet he bought from Burial. With the help of this ring, Lime was able to teleport closer to the shaman. He was very close to him, and this was the best moment to attack. Realizing his fate, the shaman screamed, and Lime delivered a final blow to the enemy's head. The goblin shaman screamed loudly in pain, but our hero continued. He was empowered by the certainty that he had finally defeated his enemy. The shaman screamed so loudly that Lime's head was ringing. At one point, the enemy broke free and screamed that he could not leave this world so easily. And it seemed to Lime that the shaman was going to use a mana attack. And at that moment, the talisman that Burial had given him began to glow. The light from the pendant burst forward towards the shaman and hit him, splitting his head in half. Being in agony, Lime reached his hand to the head of the shaman, from which emanated a red flame, thinking that there was the power of the monster. Surprisingly, this flame did not burn our hero, but was cold. Lime could not understand how this goblin had such power, Our hero could not understand how it could be just a program, and began to doubt the unreality of this world. After a few moments, he was able to exhale and realize that he had finally won. He thought that this world was no different from reality. Lime thought that usually access to machines and games is limited. If a game's sense of reality is 100, its limit in a game would be 30%. But Lime was a dark player playing for money, so he didn't have this limit. Our hero had set the senses section to 100%, but even if the sensitivity wasn't equal to that, other games didn't have such an explicit ability to sense as this one, and Lime felt this world as a different reality. He felt that if he died in this world, he would want to do it in reality, or he would want to keep wandering in the virtual world. Lime didn't know the answers to his questions, but he felt that thanks to the game, he had the opportunity to live as in the real world. But he wondered if this was true, in which world he really lived. At the moment of his reasoning, the ring on his finger changed color and became dark. Our hero realized that he could still feel the shaman's soul splitting. At that moment, his thoughts touched Lime's mind, and it seemed to him that he was watching a movie about someone's memories and resentments. And though the Arhat claimed that connecting the brain to virtual reality required research, Lime wasn't sure of the accuracy of the technique. According to sources, the waves in the brain carried movements into virtual reality, but Lime didn't feel that the senses were being stimulated by the machine. He didn't understand if a world walker could achieve the sensations he had. He felt that he could see all his senses and spells as a goblin. Saying that, Lime was very frightened by his own words. Just now, he had called himself some kind of goblin, and it had startled him. He reminded himself not to forget the virtuality of this world. Lime finally came to his senses and decided that now he needed to return to his hideout. Checking his bag, he found something he didn't expect to find in it. There was some kind of potion in there. Lime took the potion out of his bag and noticed that there was a piece of paper attached to it, but it was a potion he hadn't bought. It said, "Don't you dare die." Lime assumed that it was a powerful healing potion that Burial had given him as a bonus at their last meeting. Immediately, our hero was angry with himself for thinking like an NPC. He was angry at the arcade because they created such a game. Pushing these thoughts away, Lime smiled and said that he would never die. After a while, he found himself in his hideout in a small cave. Here he made a fire and wrapped himself in a blanket. Our hero decided to get some rest after a hard day. The next day, he returned to the Temple of the Arhat to check his characteristics again. He asked the priest if he could raise his magic level to 6, and if he had enough elides to raise all his skills in magic. He was sure he had enough, since he had been working hard for the past week. He asked the priest to double his skeleton making speed and raise his rank 3 times. To which he agreed. Lime also asked if he could increase his magic power with iridium, but the priest said that iridium was not enough for that. Our hero decided to improve his trap making and cooking skills, which he did. Lime thought about the skills he had improved and was happy to have gained level 24. He also decided to ask about the problem of the ring abilities on his hand. This problem had to be related to the spell the shaman had cast when he went to the other world. After the fight with the shaman, Lime decided to pick up his staff before leaving. When he did, he noticed that his ring had changed its color to black. Lime also realized that he would have to avoid the battle site in the future. Thinking back to that moment, Lime thought that from that moment on, the ring never changed again. Out loud, he asked to see his abilities at the temple. The device on his hand exuded 4 magical powers, and the ring's abilities were not displayed. Lime saw his abilities and was surprised that all attributes were equal to -5, and the magic power had changed to 4 magic powers. Our hero was confused as to what numbers were added to all 5 senses, and what new characteristics and attributes he had. All the values of the new characteristics were equal to 20. At the same time, Lime felt that most of the spirits were against him. He felt that someone was watching him. This annoyed him, and he decided to ask the priest why the spirits were against him, and who was watching him. Lime assumed that these characteristics were added to him because of the ring. Perhaps all the changes were because of it. Our hero felt that it was a bad thing, and that perhaps it was a spell. He also remembered that he is a necromancer, which means he can't break the spell in the temple. There were priests with divine powers in Peyton, but if Lime went there, they would definitely want to send him to the other world. That's why he never went near that temple as a necromancer. Our hero decided that in the end, he would have to deal with this spell on his own, but first, he needed to get some rest. As he walked down the stairs, he thought that the spell reminded him of some kind of test, and he should study it better, and ask Belial about it. But now, it was time for Lime to return to the real world. Logging into the computer in the real world, he found that exactly 3,000,001 had been deposited into his account. But Lime thought that if he had grabbed the trolls and sold everything, he would now have over 10,000,001. He reasoned that most players who earn money under the guidance of mercenaries or learn from hunters. In that case, The player doesn't earn more than 1 gold per day. These players are in the lowest class of the Life Edge world. At about the same moment, Lime discovered that there was a level 35 player in the first place at that moment, and he thought that if he hadn't invested in skills, he would have reached that level by then too. Our hero began to reason that he could take a couple days off and continue learning the basics of magic after selling trolls. He thought that if he could learn to create items himself, he could increase his power with magical weapons for his undead. And then an interesting thought occurred to our hero. Lime decided that he could think about creating his own weapons. After all, this skill has existed in mankind since ancient times. If he could combine it with the undead army he'd created, and add in the weapons that he would create, and his magic, all of these items together would give our hero great power. Back in the game, Lime prepared everything he needed for an overnight stay in the open and went into the forest. The forest was quiet. Our hero decided to go to the orc village to get a couple of bodies to hunt trolls. Remembering the deeds of the goblin shaman, Lime hoped that there would be no more unfamiliar monsters. Immediately after, our hero decided to set a few traps. One of the last of these traps was one in the form of a loop. Lime set a lot of traps on an area with a diameter of 100 meters, and it became his zone. At this point, he had already mastered many types of traps, from the loop trap, to the rockfall trap, to the net trap. Having set them up, he decided he was safe. A little before that, Lime decided to dirty himself a little to rid his body of the odor. Human odor could attract the Jabaka, who had a good sense of smell. After moving a short distance away, Lime encountered other humans. Judging by their weapons and clothing, he figured they were monster hunters. At first, Lime was angry that he was the chief hunter in the area, but suddenly he saw these men yelling at a defenseless girl who was sitting on the ground. She was crying, and the hunter kept shouting that she was useless and had done no good to cry. The girl asked for forgiveness, and then the man asked if she knew what her fault was. Laughing, this hunter replied that she exists for fun. At these words, the hunter received several arrows in his body. This was because Lime was very angry at his words. The other hunters turned on him, not realizing who he was. One of them was hit hard in the face by a ghostly hand. The third hunter asked Lime who he was, and he didn't answer. Our hero silently drew his weapon and sent the third hunter to the other side. Our hero watched the death of the last question, who finally asked him why he did it. Lime answered that he did it because he was not in the mood. After sending the enemies on that trail, Lime approached the girl to ask how she was feeling. She was scared and continued to stare at her savior in silence. Lime stared back at her, thinking that she looked about 16 years old, and then he remembered that he had met her somewhere before. Terrified, the girl asked our hero why he had ruined those people. Lime was surprised by this question, and he wondered if he didn't have to do it to save her. The girl added that those people were her contractors, and they had a contract to do so. At the same moment, the girl began to faint, and Lime had to use his power to prolong her life. He carried her to his shelter, and while keeping her alive, he noticed that she began to slowly regain consciousness. Sitting by the fire, Lime still couldn't quite come to his senses. He felt as if he was still holding his weapon in his hand. He also remembered that those hunters had some things with them, some of which were more valuable than Lime's thing. Also, all of their weapons were magical, though not very expensive, but they could still be sold. In addition to all this, our hero had 3 new representatives of the undead. Back in the cave, Lime decided to cook some hot food, although he didn't have the superpower of cooking delicious food, but this food was better than tasteless. After a while, the girl finally woke up and came to her senses. Lime handed her a plate of hot food, worried that she was hungry. In response, she thanked him, saying that she felt a little better already. Our hero replied that he had taken some measures to make her life last a while longer, and called her Lena. The girl was very surprised how our hero knew her name, but she also remembered the name Lena. While Lena was eating food, our hero remembered about her illness, and thought that he could not find the strength and cheerfulness she needed. Breaking the silence, our hero asked what those people needed from her. Lena answered that it was a contractual relationship where she did her homework, and they in turn trained her and paid her money. And it happened often that they beat her and gave her money for it. She added that it was like that, but now she would have to live alone so as not to disturb Uncle Katal. Lime said that he could hardly teach her any good. There was one dark and evil thought in our hero's mind. He thought that he should send such bad people to the other world because they were scum and worthless. Out loud, Lime added that those hunters had deceived Lena, which she agreed with, and finally she added that they should have stayed alive. Lime didn't understand why she wanted those people to stay alive. Afterwards, our hero said that even though Lena was still young, she was thinking like an adult. In response, Lena was surprised and said that her interlocutor also looks quite young. Lime was surprised by these words at first, and then remembered that his character also looked 16 years old. But in the real world, he was 20 years old, and their average life expectancy was about 90 years. However, he didn't tell Lena that, and clarified that it was all temporary. After these words, there was an awkward silence between the heroes, which Lime decided to eliminate with the words that he was a necromancer, and it was with the help of this magic that he was able to return Lena's life force. Lime himself did not understand why he was telling the girl about the powers of a necromancer, but he continued. Our hero showed the girl what a life revival spell looked like. A green light glowed in his hand, and Lime said that this is how the life force of the tree filled the girl's body. Lime also clarified that it was much more effective than magic, or the power of a priest. He said that black magic can be used for good, which he does. That's why he studied necromancy and healed the girl with that power too. Lena remained silent and listened attentively to her interlocutor. Then Lime offered her a deal. He said that he could teach her this if she went with him. He added that he would definitely help the girl to get back on her feet. He asked her again if she would go with him. Lena was surprised by these words of our hero, and she asked him if he wanted money for it. Lime answered her that he did not need her money and needed an assistant. Our hero thought that he was not telling the truth, because he always coped with everything alone, but he did not tell Lena. He also added that she could call him on you because they were about the same age. The girl thought a little and decided to agree with his words. Later, to start over, Lime introduced himself to her as a free mercenary without rank, and Lena in turn introduced herself as the daughter of Scar the monster hunter. A little later, Lena asked Lime a question about why he treated her so well. He quickly replied that he was treating her good-naturedly for nothing. It was simply because he showed the girl compassion. A couple days later, they moved to the forest where Lime was teaching Lena how to shoot a crossbow. The girl was pretty good at shooting at a stationary target, and our hero praised her. He taught her basic things, explaining that in combat situations, she must remain calm. Lime described one such situation where Lena would cover him from behind with her crossbow, and if the enemy got closer, she would need to grab a spear. The girl thanked Lime for entrusting her with this role. Our hero added that it was time to learn how to hunt. He told the girl to repeat the actions after. Hearing these words, Lena confirmed that she could do it. Then Lime thought about how this world had such a perception. Everything was very similar to reality, but one could not forget that values were different, and calculating how much effort it took to save Lena and how much more it would take to teach her everything would be a lot of work. Lime told Lena that she would need a weapon and thought he was glad that now he had found a companion. Lena decided to ask him if he always hunted alone. Lime said that he did it because he was a necromancer. Then she was interested in another question. She wondered how Lime became a necromancer in the first place. Our hero was a little confused and said that it happened by accident. According to him, he just read about it in a book and memorized it. Lena replied that she had heard that it was impossible to learn magic just like that, to which Lime said that he originally had a little bit of it. He said that, unlike some people, he was born with magical abilities. Then he accidentally got a basic necromancer's spell book. From there he memorized a few spells, one of which cured Lena. These answers were not enough for the girl, and she wanted to ask Lime one more question. However, at that moment, our hero's sensitive hearing heard something nearby. Lime did not let Lena ask another question by loudly stopping her. Our hero heard that a big wild boar was approaching them. Lime warned the girl to take out a crossbow. After these words, he asked if she had ever shot before. Without hearing an answer, he told Lena not to be nervous, because it wouldn't be a big deal if she didn't hit. Lime ordered her to shoot, but unfortunately no arrow hit the boar, which upset our hero. Terrified, Lena asked him what she should do now. Our hero told her to take a spear and do everything he had taught her. He had long been ready to engage in battle with this wild animal. The boar was aggressively running straight toward Lime. It wanted to attack him. But for our hero, this fight was not the first, so he just used a powerful attack. After hitting the animal a couple of times, he shouted to Lena to plunge the spear into the boar. The girl obediently ran with the weapon towards the animal without hesitating for a second. Having stuck in the spear, she again asked what she should do next. Our hero continued to fight with the boar and asked her to step back for a while. He decided to try a new spell. He summoned 4 magical powers, and in one blow, he killed the boar. Then Lime realized that if he was alone, he would have killed the boar with one blow, and that it is much harder to work with someone than alone. Our hero thought about it for a while, and decided to check how Lena was feeling. She replied that she felt quite normal, despite the fact that it was her first fight. Lime added that if it was her first time, she should rest a bit after it, because it would be even harder from now on. After examining the boar, our hero realized that he could get 20 gold pieces for it. While carving the carcass, he was a little angry that 20 coins was nothing to him, and he could earn much more for a troll. He remembered that Lena's father earned her about 300 gold pieces a month, which was commendable. Looking at Lena, he thought that 20 coins was a living wage for the family, but her treatment was worth a lot of money. After collecting all the loot in his bag, our hero said that they had enough adventures and it was time to return to the shelter. At that moment, he gave Lena a hand to help her up from the floor. At the same time, our hero added that he himself should have been more careful. He asked her not to pay attention to his mistake and to continue learning. He also told the girl that it was important to him that she did not cause problems. Lena was not thrilled with these words of Lime and asked him where he had learned to talk like that. They started laughing together at what was happening. Suddenly, Lime felt that something bad was happening, and some black energy was coming from his ring. Lena asked him what was going on, and Lime finally realized the spell of the ring. Our hero took her hand and yelled that they needed to run away immediately. Lime ran and insisted that they needed to hurry to the shelter right away. Lena didn't understand at all what was going on, or why Lime was in such a hurry. At the same moment, sinister spirits were lingering behind Lena's back. Lime confessed to the girl that his ring was enchanted before his death by a goblin shaman, and now it began to attract the dead. Eventually, our hero confessed to Lena that not only his ring was cursed, but he himself was cursed too. The undead goblins kept chasing them. At some point, Lime found that they ran close to the shelter. Immediately, our hero decided to use his magic. By running through the traps, the undead were self-mutilating. Lime cast a spell that called the undead army to obey him. For the first time, Lena saw this spell in action and was shocked at what was happening. But our hero immediately shouted at her and ordered her to get a crossbow. He told her to aim at the undead in the head, because if you hit it, they will go to the other world. The girl was very worried and began to load her weapon quickly. The Jabaku had almost completely surrounded them from all sides, and one of the monsters managed to sneak up to Lime and bite him in the shoulder. Our hero was furious at what was happening and shouted for the monsters to get away. With that, he summoned 4 magical powers that had a good effect on the monsters. After a while, the battle was over in Lime's opinion, and he came to the conclusion that it would be calmer from now on. Touching the tree, he wanted to get its life force to restore his own. After that, he felt better, but he remembered that he hadn't seen his companion Lena for a long time. The girl was standing in the same place where she was going to fill the crossbow with bolts. She froze in place and Lime shouted to make her wake up. He shouted at her that she had to learn to stand up for herself. He added that that was the reason Lena had gone after him. Angry at herself, Lena shouted that she knew it. In that instant, she fired 3 arrows from her crossbow that hit the monster. After that, Lena excitedly said that now she knew how to fight too. With a smile on his face, our hero praised his student and realized that she was fine. There were several goblins hovering in the trap above Lime at this time, and our hero was about to take their life forces from them. After this spell, he also added that the undead army should obey him. A second later, Lime's hand repelled the goblin's attack from Lena's back. Our hero used the Necromancer's magic to send the goblin to the other world and frighten the girl. Having performed this action, our hero was satisfied with the events that had occurred. Perplexed, Lena asked him what was going on and whether it was Lime's doing. Our hero answered positively, adding that he was a necromancer and could control the undead. Suddenly, the undead appeared again, and Lime hinted to Lena that she shouldn't just stand there and use the crossbow. Happy with the girl's confidence, our hero even called her his warrior. But Lime was not going to stand aside and also joined the battle. Lena shot from the crossbow, and our hero used his weapon, which delighted the girl. At the end of the fight, he praised Lena, saying that she has the qualities of an archer. But at that moment, Lena was worried about why those monsters kept pouncing on. Lime admitted that it was because he was cursed. Quickly saying this information, he added that there were still monsters that needed to be sent to the other world. Lime, with serious intentions, clarified that it was time to end it all and went into battle. After a while, Lime finished the fight and began to tally up the results. In total, there were about 300 undead from them. He got 100. Unlike our hero, Lena was very tired from the battle and asked him if he always fights like that. Lime answered that sometimes, to which the girl replied with a light laugh. He saw that she wasn't feeling well and asked her to wait a bit. Lime began to accumulate mana in his palm to transfer the life force to Lena. Next, he asked her to give him her hand to complete the spell, but the girl became sad at this and withdrew her hand. Lime said that it was for her treatment, to which she tearfully replied that she knew it and held out her hand to him. Having completed the spell, Lime asked Lena not to move in case she still needed treatment. At the same moment, he was thinking that his treatment was useless and needed to be performed closer to her heart. At the same time, he thought that he should have stopped so that Lena wouldn't think he was strained. But the girl was interested in something else. She asked if all those undead had become our hero's subordinates. Looking around, our hero answered her question in the affirmative. He added that he was a necromancer, so he became the master of the undead. To this, Lena asked another question. She asked why then the undead were attacking him if he was a necromancer, Lime raised his hand and pointed to the ring, saying that it was all because of him. Our hero told the girl the story of the appearance of the ring, and she asked if he was a conspirator. At first, Lime couldn't understand who the conspirator was and asked the girl about it. Lena replied that it is a monster hunter who recently single-handedly sent a whole village of goblins to the other world. Our hero was surprised that the rumor had already spread, but added that his ring had caused an unnecessary battle. He suggested that the ring had the ability to attract the undead, and if he wasn't a necromancer, he would have died because of it. Hearing this, Lena questioned the danger around him. Lime replied that he was safe where there were no lifeless bodies. He added that curses were a specialty of necromancers. The girl sadly listened to Lime talking about the need for research to understand the use of curses. After these words, he added that he would teach Lena magic when they returned to the village and she should be ready for it. She didn't understand what that meant, and Lime explained to her that her vial would have to be filled with either magic or divine power. Lime didn't know how long he would be able to support her and be there for her, so he had to teach her to be independent. The girl was embarrassed to hear that Lime wanted to give her strength for her future life. She even replied to him that she never thought he had such thoughts. Suddenly, Lime started reminding himself that he was in the game now, and he was alive. He also thought that this was a virtual world in which the fictional perception of the characters was not an obstacle. For Lime, this fact was neither sad nor funny at the same time. He realized that for his own peace of mind, he must that all the characters in this game were worthless. At this point, Lena asked him if she would ever have her own power, to which our hero replied that she only had to wait a little, and he was sure that it wouldn't take long. At these words, Lena blossomed. Lime gave her a hand to stand up, and they finally left the place. After a while, Lena was in front of the house on the edge of the forest and asked Lime if they should have gone so far. Our hero tiredly answered her question positively. Lime decided that he wanted to create his own weapons, and for this, he had to do a few things. First, he buried the unclean among which were not subordinate monsters on which he earned money. This place he chose right next to the built house that did not like Lena. Also, our hero saved 300 gold and bought several magic books for learning new spells and household utensils. He also made a new crossbow for himself and even bought and installed a small stove, adding heat to the house. As a result, Lime had only 20 gold pieces left after setting up the house. Our hero even began to grow his own plants, telling Lena that it was his food. The girl did not agree with him at all, and proved that it was grass and not food. She saw that Lime worked a lot of time without rest, and offered him to rest with what he agreed. While resting, Lime began to think that in this house, he could earn more money than in hunting, and his property could bring him some power in the future. He remembered that there was a player who could become almost a baron by collecting taxes from the estates around him, which brought quite a lot of money in irids. Even though this system was quite strange, it allowed him to advance to another level without fighting. That's why our hero set his sights on taking over the manor. It would be a great opportunity for his undead army, and even if he failed to achieve it, he would become a mercenary again. Lime was getting further and further into the secrets of the Life Edge. He realized that the main feature of the game was that it had no operators and no bug. It was a perfect program without a single bug, making it as realistic as possible. But if a character goes to the other world, you have to create a new one and start the game from the beginning, and NPCs will communicate with him as a stranger. And in this case, the level will increase through repeated mission, so Lime thought that magic could be used directly. After all, magic was determined by effort and talent. That's why he decided to build his house. After finishing his thought, Lime went to find Lena to get his thoughts in order and to take care of important business. He kept calling her, but she did not answer his call. Our hero had to go to the forge, and he wanted to warn Lena about it. When he approached one of the rooms, he asked Lena if she was there, and she asked him not to enter the room. Lime asked what she was doing there, and asked her to watch the house while he was in the forge. She agreed, and our hero added that if anything happened, she should run to the tower next to the wooden fence. After a while, Lime went into St. Dan's store, but surprisingly no one met him at the entrance, which was strange, and Lime thought that the man had gone somewhere else. But being the possessor of keen hearing, he heard a low cry nearby. Going into one of the rooms of the store, where the sound came from, Lime saw Uncle sitting on the floor. St. Dan was badly stabbed in the stomach and was bleeding. Our hero ran up to him asking what happened here. But Uncle had lost a lot of blood and lost consciousness, and was unable to answer any question. At that moment, Lime decided to use his power to heal St. Dan. Our hero cast a life force infusion spell. He used it to give St. Dan some of his life force. This action caused Lime to feel a great deal of pain. But it was not all for nothing, as our hero managed to bring St. Dan to his senses. Immediately afterward, Lime asked how Uncle was feeling, In response to this question, Sandan himself asked Lime whether it was his handiwork to save him. Without hiding anything, our hero confirmed that he had cured Uncle himself and asked again about what had happened. Sadly, Uncle answered that it was a revenge on him, and under the hand of Lime, they went to another room. Our hero escorted Saint Dan to the bed so he could rest. Lime asked if there was someone to call for help, but Uncle took his hand and stopped him. He told our hero that these people were still in the store. After a couple of seconds, Lime heard a noise outside the door and realized that they were not alone in the building. Drawing his weapon, he told Uncle that he would take care of these people. At that moment, outside the door, two men were breaking up the furniture in the store and looking for Saint Dan to separate his head. Peeking around the corner, Lime realized he was going to have to fight two men, but he wasn't scared. Summoning a ghostly hand spell, our hero prepared to attack. Because of Uncle's treatment, he felt dizzy due to lack of life force. He made a decision that he would take the power from these people. Coming face to face with these people, Lime asked them who they were. They did not answer in any way, and only asked if he had hidden Saint Dan from them. Lime calmly replied that he had, and that he had business with these people. They asked again where Saint Dan was, and Lime looked at them and realized that they were experienced warriors. To their question, he decided to answer simply and said he just didn't want to answer them. This answer made one of the warriors angry, and he called Lime a cheeky man and ran to attack him. But this brave man was met with an obstacle in the form of a ghostly hand that protected Lime. Having defeated the first, our hero laughed that his enemies thought that, since he was young, it would be easy to defeat him. These words and the fact that Lime used magic angered the second attacker, and he went on the attack. But our hero was not intimidated by this, and he got into a fight with him. Having resorted to his skills, Lime, with an almighty attack, gave the enemy a strong blow. After that, Lime told him to go to the other world and ruined him with a ghostly hand. He summarized the battle with him by saying that as long as he had the ghost hand, all victories would be his. After defeating him, Lime discovered that the other man was still alive. This enemy wanted to attack him, and our hero repelled his attack with his sword. Turning to him, Lime asked him not to move and not to try to escape. At that moment, a ghostly hand was flying around our hero, ready to grab the enemy at any moment. Lime asked him to tell him what they needed from Saint Dan. If the man would do so, he promised to leave him in this world. But the man disobeyed our hero and moved away, which angered Lime. Our hero reacted by saying that he would send the man to the other side of the world. After all, he had originally warned them not to move, and they decided to resist. Lime then decided to use his magic to take away their life force. Our hero felt that the life force of humans and plants are very different from each other, and he had to learn that too. He told the men that he would bind them and give them to Saint Dan. Suddenly, our hero heard footsteps nearby and thought that someone else must have been in the house. The village guards were shouting outside, and Lime didn't understand what was going on at all. Our hero went back to Uncle and he thanked him for his help. Lime began to remember that the village originally belonged to the mage Pentajagan, and now it was ruled by the village council, which included Saint Dan. That's why our hero asked again why those people attacked Uncle, and why they came back after they had wounded him. Saint Dan said that they had forgotten the box for his head, and were leaving to get it. Our hero thought this reason for returning was too ridiculous. However, Saint Dan clarified that there could have been another reason, but in any case, they would find out the truth sooner or later. A moment later, Uncle asked Lime why he was looking for him. Our hero replied that he had one request for Saint Dan. He finally confessed to Uncle that he wanted to become a blacksmith. This was unexpected news for Saint Dan, and he didn't even believe the young man at first, because he was a monster hunter. Lime replied that even though his magic skill was not high, he wanted to learn the magic of the magical world, and then he wanted to learn the skill of a blacksmith. Uncle Saint Dan said that he had already thought about it, which surprised our hero, and continued that schools of magic do not reveal the reason for the transformation of matter. But if you apply magic to the blacksmith's skills, infinite possibilities open up. Uncle also added that a great magician doesn't have to have the ability of a blacksmith, because there is a magic workshop. He also said that he doubted that Lime would forge iron if he knew how to use magic. Saint Dan admitted that at first he was suspicious of Lime, but he realized that he came with pure intentions. Our hero was surprised by Uncle's words that he suspected him of something. In response, he said that Lime appeared at the right moment, which was suspicious. Thinking over these words, our hero realized that Saint Dan is not as simple as it seems, and it was surprising how those guys were able to hurt him. Lime reiterated that he wanted to learn the basics of blacksmithing from Uncle. Saint Dan was surprised that our hero wasn't going to learn the secrets of the skill from him. Lime added that he wasn't going to stay in the village for long. Uncle didn't understand what Lime meant when he said he would stay for a while. Our hero replied that he was going to go to the city in a few months, He realized that it was dangerous to hunt monsters all the time, but at the same time, he needed to make money to live on. Lime was going to combine blacksmithing with magic. He believed it would help him hit the jackpot and make a lot of money. This is what Lime told Saint Dan, but what he really wanted was to arm an army of undead by reinforcing the equipment with necromancer magic. Our hero also had a strange feeling when he used the Life Guardian and steel, but on the other hand, he realized that the more magical weapons he had, the better. Plus, he also knew that the more he learned, the stronger he became. Lime was sure that this was the essence of the life edge. Uncle Saint Dan listened to his story and said they would start classes tomorrow. Lime asked him again who the people who had attacked the store were, but Saint Dan did not answer him, saying that for him it is personal, and the young man cannot worry because they will not come back, after which Lime left. All this time, Lena was at the manor and practicing. At one point in the training, she noticed that Lime had returned. The young man told her that from tomorrow, he would be working in the forge. Lena was surprised by these words of our hero, and suddenly sat down on the ground. Lime noted that she was practicing a lot and asked her to wait for a while. After a moment, he took the life force from the grass growing nearby. Then he asked Lena to extend her arm forward to transfer the power to her. The girl calmly did so, without asking any questions. After a while, Lime stood in the kitchen wearing an apron and cooking a meal. He was dissatisfied that all the household chores from cooking to cleaning had to be done in the game for him, while in reality, he did not do it at all. Lena, on the other hand, had no cooking skills, even though she had worked in a hotel before. Coming back from his thoughts, Lime thought why the girl didn't leave her room for dinner. He went to her room and started calling loudly, but Lena didn't answer. After a few attempts to shout to the girl, Lime was afraid that she had fainted. Not thinking long, he burst into her room, afraid of what he might see there. But the fears of our hero was not confirmed, and Lena just quietly slept on the bed. He decided that now it was time to wake her up, and approached her. Lime had already reached out his hand to her, but stopped and looked at her, because she was sleeping very nicely. Our hero immediately changed his mind about waking her up, and decided to let her sleep some more, and left her room. 3 months passed, and Lime finally had his own weapon in his hand. He was incredibly happy about it, as he had been working at the forge every day for the past few months. Originally, Lime was going to learn how to use a hammer in a year, but he continued to learn in his spare time. Uncle Saint Dan was in his debt, and so Lime could ask him to teach him everything he knew. At one point, he asked Saint Dan for a book on metal forging, so he could learn it by heart. But the language used by the author of the book was so heavy that it was unbearable to read it. Lime, of course, tried to do it, but finished it rather quickly. The result of his work for 3 months was a special sword. On this sword, our hero with cold hands carved a magic coin. This had to be done after using the weapon crafting skill to get special properties. However, it was obvious from the sword that it was made by a beginner, as the quality was not very good. This sword was made with a 3rd level skill. Our hero called his first weapon an ice-long sword. Holding it in his hands, Lime thought that he had put a lot of effort into creating it. And even though he realized that the blade was not very sharp and he was generally not proficient with this weapon, but it was his success. Immediately after creating this sword, Lime went to Uncle Saint Dan's store, and he asked him from the doorstep if he had succeeded. Lime proudly replied that he had succeeded. Saint Dan added that he had never seen anyone so passionate about blacksmithing before. Our hero replied that his goal was to become a master of magical weapons. With tears in his eyes, Saint Dan said he was letting him go on his way and wished him a happy journey. Our hero interrupted Uncle, saying he had a surprise. Lime asked Saint Dan to accept the gift of his first work. He added that he would like the master who taught him the art of blacksmithing to accept his gift. The uncle was touched by Lime's words and asked him to accept a gift from him as well. He handed our hero a book containing Saint Dan's personal secrets of blacksmithing. The teacher added that it was handwritten and might be a bit obscure, but he wanted our hero to read it. Lime thanked Saint Dan, and right after that, Uncle said that if the young man was in the capital, he should visit Duke Zalkar's. Lime had to tell him Saint Dan's name and prepare a sword. Our hero immediately realized that this was another task. After these words, the heroes said goodbye to each other and went away. After finishing his business in the store, Lime went to the temple to learn his abilities again. As usual, the priest led him to the place where the character's characteristics appeared from the water. This time, the screen showed much more statistics than in the past, and Lime realized that the information on the internet was correct. After all, in order to find out everything quickly, the temple should ask the user to reveal it and show the contents. Immediately after, Lime asked directly about the amount of iridium. The screen showed the number of irid and a list of magic and skills he possessed. Lime realized how much iridium he would need next time. Our hero asked to increase his skill in controlling powerful undead, and the priest quickly agreed. As soon as his skill was improved, Lime felt that something was wrong with him, and his nose was bleeding. Lime was afraid that if this continued, he would go to the other side of the world. Quickly realizing why this was happening, he asked the priest to raise his level urgently. He fulfilled Lime's request, and his level became 28. It turned out that to possess the skill of controlling powerful undead player level must be at least 28. Lime was angry because he could not foresee this, and spent Ear to increase the level, and now it will be difficult for him to save it. When Lime returned to his house, he found Lena waiting for him with a packed backpack. She told Lime that she had already packed for a long time, to which Lime replied that she was too fast. Lime clarified that he still had things to do, to which Lena was angry that he hadn't told her earlier. They went into Lime's workshop, where he was going to show the girl how he made weapons. He raised his hands over the billet and cast the weapon-making spell a few times. After a while, it was finally ready, and there was still one more thing left to do. The magic sigil for the spell had to be carved on it. Our hero summoned a mighty will and ordered the brilliant power to come. Then he called his name and said that he controls this mana, and he bestows the almighty mana to the weapon. Lena watched Lime's actions mesmerized the whole time. When our hero put the Necromancer's magic into the weapon, he scared the girl with it. Lime replied that he needed to use this magic and asked her to wait a little longer. But instead of a weapon, a ring broken in half fell on the table. Lime sighed with a smile that he had failed, and Lena in turn asked what he was doing. Our hero wanted to make a ring that could absorb life force, but unfortunately he failed, and the ring was ruined. Lime decided to make another axe just in case. Having finished his work, Lime said that now it was time for them to leave. But after these words, our hero heard someone calling his name.